What's up, darkly dreaming Dexterites, serial killers, and plastic wrap salespeople of the world? Welcome back to Fantasy Files Reacts. This is the show that we take off the bench once in a while, mostly when a new season of Dexter or Yellow Jackets releases. I am your host, Spencer, joined by Nick Henderson from the Dexter Daily and the 4-Player Podcast to talk about Dexter Original Sin, the new spin-off show that gives us Dexter's origin story. We'll be talking about episodes 4 and 5, and everything from the main series is fair game to talk about, so be aware of spoilers in this episode. As always, the links to our socials and Patreon are linked down below if you would like to check them out. We love talking to you guys. Feel free to reach out to us. We try to respond to pretty much everything. Also, our Patreon, if you would like to support us there, means that you can watch these episodes live as we record them. You can participate in the chat and talk directly to us as we're doing these episodes, and you don't have to wait the give or take 2 or 3 weeks before the episode gets up to YouTube. Nick, his links are also in the description. So go check him out on the 4-Player Podcast or his articles on Dexter Daily. I'll make sure to have them all down there. And without further ado, let's talk about our favorite serial killer. Hello,
Hell
Nick.
Yeah. Hello.
We've been talking for a long time behind the scenes backstage.
About 25 minutes, actually.
About 25 minutes, yeah. But how are you doing? Are you
I'm
doing good this
By the
week?
way, yeah, great. It's lazy weekend.
Yeah,
and that's always fun. I just want to shout out. I appreciate your darkly dreaming Dexter reference there in the the intro. I believe that's the title of the first book, right?
Yep.
Yeah, just nice.
Have you ever read them?
I have read them. I don't like them very much.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I say that.
I've heard they're very different.
They're very different, and I think most people's introduction to the characters through the show. Yeah. And I say this with the utmost respect to Jeff Lindsay for writing them, but I'm just not a huge fan of like. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. There's 5 books, maybe 6. I don't remember.
I think so. Yeah.
I've read all of them, and like the last 2, I think for a long period of time were like they had me. I was like, okay, I'm enjoying.
Really?
This. They go off the rails. Like, and I say that. I mean, he clearly just has a very different vision for like.
It gets very supernatural, right? Like it gets very like
I don't know if it's like literally supernatural, but they definitely treat his dark passenger like
that's what I've heard.
Like it's an actual like a demonic thing living in his body.
Right.
And I don't know if it's supposed to be metaphorical or if they're like, and they're just describing it that way to kind of like paint a very vivid picture of what it is. Yeah. But like it comes across very much as like an actual demon that he like. That lives in his body. It's weird.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
And there's one of the books literally ends with like him like a live shark eating someone that he's about to kill. It very much feels like this just jumped the shark moment.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And one of the most interesting differences between the books and the show is that Brian, his brother, is alive for almost the entire duration of the books. Like,
are they killing together?
No, but like Brian, I mean, there might be moments where they are, but there are moments throughout the book, or actually a lot of the stories in the books involve Brian kind of coming in and out of his life and like trying to like tempt him into doing evil things. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Which is very much like what they did in the first season of the show. But like, just imagine if like the
Brian
show continued from that point and Brian was still alive, but he was like out there living his own life, and every once in a while Brian would pop in and he'd be like, you want to go fuck some shit up? And Dexter's like, I don't think so, but maybe I love my brother. And then they go out and they do weird shit. It's weird. The first book is the most similar because the first book is very much like the first season of the show leading up to the Brian revelation. And then just Brian continues to be a thing for the rest of the book series.
What do you think? Do you think Brian should have stuck around for at least like 2 seasons? No.
Okay. I don't think so. I think he was a great main villain, and I think the way they ended his character was perfect. Like, I mean, it came down, like, as it often does, it comes down to like him having to choose between his real family and his his blood family and his foster family,
chosen family. Yeah,
choosing his sister over everybody else,
right?
Because his relationship with Deb is the crux of like the whole thing,
right?
So I think it was a beautiful way to do it. And they left themselves open. It always pisses me off so much. The sixth season of the show, there's an episode where Brian kind of comes back and is like his dark passenger, right? Like instead of Harry, we see Brian. They set them up to have like one of the like season 6 could have been my favorite fucking season of the entire show. Because I was under the impression when that happened, because like the first half of that season, so good. I love the first 6 episodes of season 6.
That's the religious one, right?
Yeah. With Colin Hanks, the Doomsday Killer. They end episode 6 with this wonderful moment where he like drowns this guy in the water because I'm not gonna get into detail. He drowns the guy in the water because of religious reasons.
Yeah.
And that's
the moment you can spoil stuff, by the way.
Like, So he's trying his best to like follow in the footsteps of Brother Sam and like kind of like understand what it means to be religious and do the right thing. And he's like, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can set a better example for my son. Maybe I can kill for the right reasons or whatever. And he's like, I'm going to try and Brother Sam's final wish was to forgive this guy who murdered him. And so he goes and he's like, I'm going to give you a chance to come clean. I'm going to give you a chance to turn yourself in because you murdered someone. And this was like a big moment for him. And that guy just laughs in his face. And it's like, I got away with it.
That's
Dexter pushes him and drowns him in the fucking water. And it's an amazing moment. And when he comes walking back out of the water, Brian's on the shore just like clapping. And he's like, you missed me, brother. And I was like, that is fucking incredible. And then I thought the rest of the season, it was going to be like 6 episodes of him with like the devil on his shoulder. Like Brian. And then like, it was going to build up to, in the final episode, he was going to shed Brian, Harry would come back, and it'd be this like beautiful thing. But it was for one fucking episode. It was the dumbest episode ever. I hated that episode so much. I still watch it every time I rewatch the series. But it's like it is easily my least favorite episode of the entire series. Which is such a shame.
Funny.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get into another tangent, but
that's
great. I mean, they obviously probably only had that actor for one episode, and they were like, "Well, I'd rather have him I'd rather have him for one episode than none." So they just did something with it. But I was like, "Oh God!" They teased it. It was like, and everything after that moment, like it just that season never quite got back on track. It ends really strong. I think the final scene of season 6, where Deb walks in on him, in the church, incredible. One of my favorite scenes in the entire show. Amazing. Ends on a really high note. But like, man, the season kind of very suddenly went off the rails and never quite got its footing back.
That's funny that you like the first half of it so much, because I literally I skip season 6 when I do a rewatch. Man.
Let me tell you, I can give you a quick recap here. First 6 episodes. There's some good ones.
Okay.
First episode of season 6 is where he goes back for his high school reunion. It's hilarious. And it has a great kill scene. Wonderful stuff. And they're setting up the whole Doomsday thing. Love it. That's
right.
And then season 2 is when they start. Episode 2 is where they start to find all the Doomsday Killer stuff. I think the highlights are, and then episode 3 is the Tooth Fairy. One of my favorite villains of the week.
I remember the title. I don't remember he keeps teeth or something, right?
Yeah, so they missed a great opportunity for an original sin Easter egg here, because he specifically talks in this episode about this killer that he followed when he was in like college or something. He was following all the newspaper clippings about him, and it was this guy who was just tearing through the Pacific Northwest, murdering people and like dumping their bodies on like the lawn of like sheriffs and stuff. And he was ripping out their teeth and taking them as trophies. And they never caught the guy, so he was like idolized. He's like, "Oh my God, he's so brazen. He's so good. He's perfect." And then he ends up realizing that this dude is like living in Miami as he's like this retired old dude. So he decides to take him out. And then at the very end, he kills him. And he realizes that this guy is like super angry and pathetic and like he hates his son with a passion. and and he, instead of murdering him, he decides to like smother him with a pillow and leave him in his apartment so that no one's going to know that he disappeared. No one's going to know that he was anything other than this pathetic old man. And it's this awesome episode. They literally had an original sin. Him like flipping through the Penthouse magazine, looking at
why didn't they have
the newspaper clippings and stuff? And they could have put the fucking Tooth Fairy article in that. It would have been great, but they didn't.
Oh man.
And then there's the Angel of Death. There's the two like set piece deaths from the Doomsday Killer with the horses riding through the street with the mannequins, which is really cool. And the Angel of Death, where they
see that's where it fell off the rails for me. Was
the Angel of Death?
The specific scene where they're being paraded through the streets. I'm
oh man, that was like so. I'm
like,
that.
What is this like super high profile like doomsday prophecy? Like this is so weird.
I mean, I liked the idea of a killer who was killing for religious reasons. It was neat.
For sure. That was interesting.
And they were trying to do something because like they were trying to do something that would kind of like live up to like the spectacle of like the Ice Truck Killer, I think, because they've kind of gotten away from that for a long time. So they wanted to do something where it was like super theatrical, and I thought it was really neat. And then like there's the girl who's booby trapped, and she has the collar of spikes, and then it like the wings come up and it like she bleeds to death.
Oh,
and then all the locusts come out, and everyone's freaking out, and Dexter's just standing there, and he's like looking around, and he sees Travis just kind of like in awe of like everything he's done or whatever, and he's like, who do I spy here? And I was like, that's such a cool moment.
It's such a cool moment.
And then Brother Sam, and then episode 6 happens with the stuff on the beach, and I was like, oh my god, I love this season. This season's so fucking good. And then the Brian thing happens, and it's terrible, and it never recovers.
Well, I was watching the Dexter final cut with Molly Brown. Yeah. And they asked her like what's been your favorite like twist or whatever in Dexter, and she was like the reveal that
I saw that
that the Doomsday Killer the old guy, the pastor or the priest or whatever was not real. It was all in his head.
I saw that coming a mile away.
Really, I had forgotten about it, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember being so shocked. Like,
I'm really glad it landed for some people, and I don't remember what it was. Oh no, I remember exactly what it was. Because there's a scene earlier in the season where Travis is in a diner with Professor Geller, and the waitress like walks up and like pours him coffee or whatever. Doesn't even acknowledge him sitting there. Yeah, and I noticed that, and I was like, is he real? Because like I started thinking about it, and every time he was in a scene, I was like, nobody's talking to him, nobody's acknowledging he's there. So when that moment finally came,
you were ready for it.
It's a cool twist, but my body was ready for it. It was just like,
oh man,
this is happening. But I mean, I liked it.
That's cool.
I feel like it was kind of they could have been more coy about it. Or
sure,
that's an example of a twist that I think. I like to believe that if Clyde Phillips was at the helm during that season, he would have, and he was doing the exact same like theme and story and characters and everything. I think he could have pulled that off and made it so that nobody saw it coming. That's just another example of, I'm not a huge fan of Scott Buck. As a showrunner, even though admittedly we talked about this earlier, he did do one of my favorite seasons of the show, season 7. I love that season.
For sure.
But,
sure.
He's not. He has his moments, but
a
lot of times he's like a bull in a china shop.
Well, before we get into general thoughts, is there anything new on the Dexter Daily? Anything you'd like to promote or anything like that?
I mean, I've been doing my reviews / recaps for all the episodes. I have not written the one for episode 5, which we're going to talk about today. I'm going to start that today. Nice. And I don't know. I mean, John, who owns the site and does like 95% of the posting on it and whatnot, he does a really good job of staying on top of stuff. He did a collaboration with Showtime on Instagram the other day, which is cool. Whoa. Like I don't know how Instagram collaborations work, but it's like a thing. where it's like two accounts can like promote the same thing.
Correct.
So they were sharing a bunch of the official like cast photos and stuff for Original Sin. So they did that.
Cool.
That was really neat.
I saw somebody, it was probably John, I would assume. He did a timeline where the title was saying that this article will show you where the timeline stops for Original Sin, and I was like, I don't think I want to know. I don't want to know. So I didn't click on it. But
a lot of that kind of ties into talking about whether or not we think Original Sin is going to be a one-off or it's going to get multiple seasons, because we still don't know yet.
I think it gets multiple seasons.
I think it's going to get renewed.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way it's just one season.
And I think a lot of it, I think the way the show is written, and a lot of it comes down to like the timeline he was talking about. Kind of, it's like there's no way it's just going to be a one season thing, because there are certain things that we know they need to portray that are huge parts of this. Like there's only one point where I feel like it makes sense to like maybe end Original Sin, and they're not going to reach it in one season.
Right.
So I think it gets renewed, but we'll see. I think the big thing right now, I mean, we're both kind of like waiting for news for Dexter Resurrection to start dropping, because they start filming this week.
Yeah.
And at this point, we know nothing other than Michael C. Hall is attached to it. James Remar is apparently officially attached to it now as Harry, which is cool. It was kind of a weird way for him to announce that. He apparently revealed this in a cameo that he did with a fan.
Really?
Yeah. John sent me the cameo clip. He's like, look at this. And I watched it, and I was like, this is a James Remar cameo. What am I watching? And then he just starts talking about, he's like, yeah, I played Harry in the original Dexter, and there's a new one coming out called Dexter Resurrection, and I'm in that too. And I was
no way.
I was like, did he just
break NDA?
I was like, did he just have a Harrison Ford moment where he was just like, I don't give a shit. I'm James Remar. So yeah, it sounds like Harry will be back in Dexter Resurrection, which is exciting.
That's funny. Well, I have a note here with the news of James Remar returning. I wonder if there will be mentions to Original Sin in Resurrection. Like,
I think so.
Remember when you strapped me to your table, Dex? It was the first time you really accepted me, or something like that. Like there's got to be some sort of exchange.
John and I have been talking a lot about what we think there's going to be in terms of like connective tissue between these two shows, because like they're doing them almost parallel, like almost they're practically filming them at the same time. So like I feel like they'd be kind of foolish to not take advantage of that. So John is really stuck on, he thinks there's going to be at least one new character from Original Sin that is going to carry over into Resurrection.
I hope it's not Tanya.
He thinks it's Tanya, but I will say this, and I don't necessarily disagree with him, but at the same time, I was like, I don't know how you're going to do that. These stories are essentially 30 years apart. She's already like 40 at least in Original Sin. So if they did that, she'd be like 70 in Resurrection. And I always feel like when you take an actor and you like try to age them up, it's so obvious. Like it's so.
Well, I don't
distracting.
I don't think that it's good writing, unless they find like an amazing way to do it. I don't think it's good writing to take a new character from Original Sin and put him in Resurrection, because I think everything in Resurrection, there should be ties to Original Sin and like little like, oh, remember when we did this or whatever.
I think Batista is pretty much at this point all but guaranteed to be back.
And so someone like that, I think that needs to be someone that returns for Resurrection. Because like if you just bring characters from Original Sin to Resurrection, it feels almost like disjointed from the main series. And so, because none of these new characters were in the main series. Yeah. So,
I mean, I think the impetus of that theory about her coming back would be that she is specifically contacted because of she was around when he first started with Miami Metro, and maybe she has some. Oh, maybe they reach out to her because also we don't know how the season's going to end.
She also tells him about the M99. So with that being such a key factor in New Blood, that might be, they might need somebody who knows more about that. I don't know.
It also could just be Batista's recommended. Like Batista might be like, "Hey, I know somebody who might be good to talk to about this." You know, there's ways they could bring her in, but I also just don't want them to bring Sarah Michelle Gellar in for Resurrection and then like age her up, because then it's just going to be distracting.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see what happens. I like the idea of there being connective tissue. We don't have the full picture yet for Original Sin, so who knows? But yeah, I do think they're going to reference things that are revealed in Original Sin that we didn't know about prior.
Sure.
And yeah, we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, to the people watching, Nick and I talked for like 20 minutes backstage about some really cool Dexter stuff, so I might stitch that in now. So you guys will be seeing, our previous conversation in just a second.
In case we reference it.
Yeah, in case we reference it, because we're probably going to. So see you guys in a second. Enjoy this awesome conversation we just had.
It's a very popular series.
Yeah.
It has been dormant it was dormant for about 8 solid years. That probably didn't help.
Yeah.
And then New Blood was very, very successful, but a lot of that success stemmed from people who already were familiar with the show coming back.
Right.
My hope is that Original Sin is kind of like getting people into the character new people into the character in the show.
Because I guess you could start with Original Sin, huh?
You could, yeah.
It'd be...
Yeah, you could, but I feel like, right out of the gate, I don't think you should, because right out of the gate, you would be confused.
Yeah.
The very first scene would confuse you, and also spoil
what
comes out. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be one of those situations where it's still best to kind of like watch them in the order in which they were released.
Right.
However,
yeah, because the first scene,
the first scene spoils the end of New Blood.
Right.
The funny thing is, if you remove that scene from the very first episode of Original Sin, then you could totally start with Original Sin and just watch it chronologically. But they still kind of that they position it in such a way that they kind of expect the audience to know a certain amount, because they don't. It's not like, it doesn't really feel like Dexter with training wheels, because there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of implied that you already know. So I think at the end of the day, which I think is better, because it means they can just get right into the meat of the story that everybody wants to see.
Yeah.
And and it allows them to do some of this cool stuff they're doing with kind of like how it's bookending the timeline stuff.
Right.
So I think at the end of the day, it's just gonna be one of those things where it's like, you might be tempted to start with Original Sin.
Right.
You don't.
Right.
But
yeah.
If that is your entry point, it's great. It's great. But they do, now that they're 4 episodes, at episode 4, they obviously reveal that there's a child murderer out there.
Yeah.
And he is obviously very bothered by the fact that there's someone hurting kids, and that's integral to making audiences buy into supporting this character. And they took a little bit longer getting to that point. So I just want to know what people, like a newbie's first impression of the character is, based purely on Original Sin.
Yeah, that's so curious. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how somebody would react to that, because you're right. The main show, right from the beginning, the first season's job is getting you to like Dexter.
I think the first episode.
Yeah, the first
job
episode.
And obviously back then they didn't know how popular or how successful it was going to be, and they were basically making this thing and just putting it out there and hoping that people didn't immediately go, "What the fuck?" and tune out. So we have to come out of the gate hard, and that was, let's have him murder a pedophile, a choir teacher pedophile, right out of the gate, and then have him get in his face and be like, "I would never hurt kids," kind of thing.
Right.
And
kind of shows you who he is right away.
Yeah. I think without that, it would have been the character in general would have been a harder sell. But I think people right out of the gate were like, okay, yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's such a good point. I've definitely thought about the first scene of him killing the choir teacher, but yeah, that's really interesting. I never.
It's also a weird thing, because they hadn't really kind of figured out what his MO was technically, other than he kills bad people. So like,
yeah,
but the implication was that he had been doing this for a long time prior to us meeting him in that show.
right.
But like his MO when he kills that choir teacher is nothing like what he. I mean, I guess he technically does. He does eventually strap him to the table, but like he kidnaps him with the garrote wire in his car, makes him drive out, and then he literally digs up the bodies of the kids that he buried in the Everglades and like
That's
lays them out
right.
for him. And it's like
Later Dexter doesn't do that. Yeah.
never really seen Dexter go that far, like digging up dead kids to like display.
Right.
Like he usually just settles for pictures.
Right.
Like, he
Yeah.
actually, uh,
So
but
yeah, remind me. So he takes him out. He takes him out there, shows him the dead bodies,
yeah,
and then he takes him to his table.
yeah, he's like has him up against the wall and he's like, look at
Yeah.
what you've done or whatever.
What you've done.
And then he said he doesn't want to look, and he says, open your eyes or I'll cut your eyelids right off your face. Which I always love that.
Yeah.
And then he says, open your eyes and look at what you did, which of course we hear Harrison say at the end of New Blood, which is also.
Oh, what?
Are you just now realizing this?
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's supposed to be like the thematical like bow on the whole thing, is where Harrison says, "Open your eyes and look at what you've done," and that's exactly what he says to the choir teacher.
That's so good. Holy shit!
I know we're getting on so many tangents. You
sure, it's fine.
Show, but like, I've always thought you can kind of see. Because everyone talks about the last 3 seasons of the show are kind of different, and some people hate them, some people are okay with them, some people love them, whatever. But you can see the attempt they attempt to do the same kind of like thematical tie-in, like tie everything together in the final season of season 8 of the show. Because and I've never understood this, but like when he's getting ready to kill the brain surgeon in the last season. Yeah. He goes back, he sets up a kill room in the same room where he killed the choir teacher for some reason. And It's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. It has no connection to the brain surgeon, it has no connection to him.
Yeah.
It has it's literally for the sake of the audience to like be like, oh, he went back to where he was in the first episode. It's like, why? Why though? Right?
Yeah.
And then you see Clyde Phillips come back and take the show over again, and he's like, let me show you how that's done. And he does the whole open your eyes and look at what you did. And I was like,
right.
That's how you tie shit back together.
That's how you tie it back together. That's
what a stupid bow that was. Look at this.
I know, yeah. For
it's so weird. I mean, again, I think season 8 is enjoyable for what, but like that always perplexes me more than maybe any other decision they made.
Yeah.
Near the end of the show. It's like, what is the shoehorning of the choir director thing into this?
Honestly, I do not remember the final 2 seasons of the show that well at all. The only thing I remember about them is the occasional, like when Hannah would come back, and I liked everything with Hannah. I think Hannah was actually like a really good decision.
I think Hannah in season 7 was excellent. Hannah, in fact, I always say season 7 of that show, even though it's Scott Buck, and I don't think he's a very good showrunner, I have lots of problems with his creative decisions. But season 7 of the show is one of my favorite seasons of the entire show. Really? Somehow, it's probably in my top 3, maybe top 4, somewhere in there. It comes close. It comes close to me. I love that season. And a lot of it has to do with, because that's when Deb knows about him, and that whole dynamic. Was crazy. That dynamic is crazy, and they have a lot of fun with it, and it makes the whole thing, it kind of like reinvigorates the whole thing.
Right.
And then
it needed that.
And Hannah, I thought, was a really great addition, and the whole thing was about, kind of builds up to him choosing his sister over Hannah, which is important. Yeah. And then in season 8 they bring her back, and I don't dislike her in season 8, but like, I don't know, it didn't feel.
Yeah.
It felt weird. Like it felt weird that the whole thing kind of ended with him like, I'm gonna run away with Hannah to Argentina. It's kind of like, okay, I mean, I guess, but like, that's not a direction I thought we were going here. But
see, I would have liked it if he had actually run away to Argentina. I would have liked it, because at some point you have to say he's either going to die or get imprisoned and then probably die, or he's got to get out of Dodge. Yeah. And I would have liked it if he had like if they wanted to give Dexter a happy ending, I would have liked that just as much as him like dying in like a tragic
Yeah,
way.
I think my argument though is that I don't mind him having I think Dexter's happy ending, quote unquote, the only happy ending to me that really makes sense is that he managed like he gets like he gives his son a future, which is what they were going for in New Blood.
Yes, yeah.
And because I still don't think he himself deserves
Mm.
happiness. I think at the end of the day, somebody has to pay for like he's murdering people. I mean, he's murdered hundreds of people. It's
Yeah.
and I don't know. I something about it just didn't sit right with me. The thought of him just like walking off into the sunset and being and living on. I feel
Do you
like
think do you think a character like Batman or Daredevil
they don't murder
uh
people. In fact, they're like the
oh,
crux of their character
yeah.
is they don't kill
Mm,
people.
yeah,
Both of them. All
that's true.
even Daredevil, like he comes close, and when he comes close, he's like he hates
Hmm.
himself for it.
Right.
Obviously, Dexter's a character who thrives on killing people, so it's like,
Yeah, that's true.
and they make the comparison. Harrison's like, so you're like Batman, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, he's kind of like Batman, but Batman doesn't fucking murder people.
Right, that's true.
Um,
Yeah.
I just and I always have I'm always a little perturbed by people like it's fine if you want Dexter to have a happy ending.
Sure.
Like because part of me would be like okay with it probably. But like people who are upset because the
Yeah.
the the writer's instinct was not to give him a happy ending
I think that's
has always
fine.
bothered me.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
I think yeah, I think the people that were like Dexter deserves a happy ending, I don't think he deserves anything. Like or at
No.
least nothing
He
good.
destroyed his sister who is like the most
Yeah.
amazing character, like one of
He
the most
got
amazing
Rita
characters on
killed. He got
yeah.
many of his best friends killed. And it's like I could really go either way if they
He
wanted to give
poisoned
him
the well. Like that's what he's done. He's poisoned the well for everybody
yeah,
around him.
right.
And I think the character deserves a satisfying ending,
Yeah,
but I don't necessarily think that ending is going to be happy
happy,
for him.
right?
I just think that he deserves fans of the show deserve a good ending. And I
Sure.
don't necessarily if we've gotten that ending. I was okay with the way New Blood ended, but if they think they can do better, like doing Resurrection,
Yeah.
I'm all for it. I just don't. I just desperately don't want that ending to be him walking off into the sunset, living happy.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Interesting. Very good.
I hope he. I don't know. See, I don't know what that ending is. I always loved.
Yeah.
We talked about this last time. I always loved Clyde Phillips' original pitch for the
Idea where he's in the chair and
electric chair and he sees all of his victims, and like the last shot of the show might be him like smiling to himself, like
hmm
he's happy to me, like he's like reveling in like what he's accomplished in his life. But like I don't necessarily think he deserves to like he's not a normal person. He's not going to go get married and live happily ever after. Going to
right.
he's not going to be able to live a life where the people around him aren't going to die left and right because of his
Were you
decisions.
were you satisfied with the final scene of season 8 where he's like a lumberjack or whatever out in the middle of nowhere?
I was
Did
more
that kind of
confused.
satisfy your
I mean, I think thematically speaking, I think I was satisfied because he looked miserable
yeah.
and he looked like he was just like a shell of himself,
hmm
which I think he kind of deserves.
hmm
Uh, so I think thematically I was into it, and they've talked a little bit about Scott Buck talked a little bit about kind of like the impetus of him writing that ending,
hmm
and like it made sense hearing what he was going for, but it didn't come across on the screen. And
Yeah.
what he was talking because he talks about how the Pacific Northwest of America is like kind of like it's like one of the most active hubs for serial killers in
Oh.
2013. So he fled to the Pacific Northwest, and he said something like he wanted him to be surrounded by a place where he was constantly hearing chainsaws,
Hmm.
which would made him think about his mother being butchered, and
Whoa.
it was like his means of like punishing himself for
I didn't
getting
even
everybody in
think
his life
about that.
that's because they don't make it clear in the show. It's like, he said that, and I was like, okay, then why were not
you
all
could
of
have
your
done
efforts,
something with that? Yeah.
Why were not all of your efforts being working towards making that perfectly clear?
Right.
Because that's what we needed to. That's what people needed to see and hear and understand.
Ooh.
But like, none of that shit comes across on the screen. But I did get the vibe that like he was punishing himself for what he ultimately ended up doing to Deb and Rita and everybody else.
Right.
So I liked it thematically, but I was still in the moment. I was like, when I knew like that was the final, when I like literally when I was like, this is the end. I thought this was the end. We'd never see Dexter again. This is the end of the show.
Yeah.
I was like, huh?
Yeah. Dang.
So I'm glad they picked it up and continued on with it, because I think it deserved better than that. And I also think that particularly confusing ending set up a really interesting pickup point for New Blood, like waiting the 10 years and then like starting his story again, set it up for some really interesting stuff.
Well, that's why New Blood worked so well, is because it was like, how many years were in between? Like 10?
About 10. 9 to 10 years, I think, is the implication.
Okay. And it's like we've also spent that in real time.
Yeah. Like he's been out there living his life like while we have, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what made New Blood initially work so well for me, is I'm like, oh, this isn't like picking up in the Pacific Northwest. This is like 10 years.
Stuff has happened.
Yeah, stuff has happened. And so
the idea of him being abstinent from killing for 10 years was just like, that is so cool. Like we know he's gonna, like, treating it like he's an addict and he's about to fall off the wagon. Really cool.
Yeah, really good.
And I think Clyde Phillips was like, I think Clyde Phillips just has a really good instinct for like what makes interesting stories, and I think we're seeing that in Original Sin.
Yeah,
I think we'll see it in Resurrection. That's why I'm more excited than nervous about Resurrection, because I think he has it in his bones, and he has a good instinct for the show, which I don't think Scott Buck ever had. We'll see obviously we'll have to wait and see what happens, but it's exciting. It's exciting to see.
It's for sure exciting. I had a note in my general thoughts here that I'll just tell you about right now before we like actually start. I'll stitch this in later.
Okay.
But I think it's when I was watching episode 5, I especially because Original Sin focuses so much on the serial killer aspect of Dexter and how much Harry struggles with it.
Yeah.
I wrote this note while watching the episode. I said, the thing I love about Dexter is they could have just made him Joe Vigilante with a sense of justice and made him a Daredevil or Batman type character. But they came up with a really original premise. And because you can tell what they're going for with the character. We were talking about how they want you to like Dexter, and so we tend to like these vigilante characters where it's like, I love Daredevil just like leaving his apartment and going out on his own at midnight and just beating up bad guys. Like, I love that vigilante feeling, or like Green Arrow or any of those guys.
That we all wish we could do, but we all know realistically we can't or shouldn't do,
Yeah. But at the end of the day, how well would another vigilante show, how well would that go? We had Green Arrow, we had, whatever, like 24 and all sorts of other shows, like the Bourne Identity, all those kind of movies and stuff. We have these like masculine like vigilante characters, and not that Dexter isn't masculine, but like we have the archetype already. And so for them to be like, hey, let's make him a vigilante, but let's not make it out of a sense of justice and doing right in the world. Let's make this like a problem. And they turned it into this idea of a serial killer. Obviously, it's based off the books, which already existed. So I guess you could go back that far and say like the books had the original idea. But I think it's so interesting because some people, I've heard like actually quite a lot of people mock the idea of like, oh, serial killer with a heart of gold, like good guy serial killer. And I never understood why just the overall premise was mocked. It's like, who else? It's so original.
I
Who
also
else has
think,
done something like this? Like,
I mean, I think Dexter is kind of a one of a kind character, which is why I love him. But
yeah,
um, I also think that I think that I don't want to sit here and say that I don't want to mock the people who are mocking
sure.
Dexter, because some of those things are probably valid, or they're not coming from a place of what's the word I'm looking for, like some people who are
Vitriol.
saying that they know what they're saying, they know what they're talking about, and it's just their opinion, which is totally fine. I respect it, but I do think there are a lot of people who are saying things like that who are missing the point entirely, because he's not a character he's not a serial killer with a heart of gold.
Yeah.
He is a serial killer who has been, that's quite honestly, like, honed and crafted and manipulated by his father, and his sense of justice is fake. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I think the show is, I think the best moments in the show, best character moments, are when Dexter likes to talk about doing something out of a sense of justice, but you can see in his face and you can hear it in his dialogue that he doesn't
really care about justice.
And I think they're doing a really good job of that in Original Sin.
Yeah.
Too. Like, they're pointing out these moments, fast forward all the way into New Blood, where he's talking about, like, when Harrison is, like, in the kill room with him, and he still thinks his dad does this out of a sense of justice, and that whole scene, like, after he kills Kurt Caldwell, and then he's just like, at this point he is like, oh my god, I'm killing people, my son's here, this is the life I've always wanted, and he's like sawing this man into pieces in front of his son.
I think that was the moment that when he started cutting the body up, that's when Harrison was like,
they
almost
never show that aspect of the stuff. They imply it, obviously, but they never show it, and they showed it very subtly but graphically in that scene, where you can kind of see it's blurred in the foreground, where he has him, like, sawing through bone in this, like, sawing Kurt Caldwell's arm off, and you can see Harrison in the background with this just, like, pale look on his face, like,
oh my god,
what the fuck am I looking at here? And Dexter just looks happy.
Yeah.
And it's like, the fact that he is blind to the damage that he's doing to the people around him is important.
Yeah.
The fact that he has taken what his father has taught him, because it helps keep him alive and keep him doing the things that he wants to be doing. And I do think he genuinely connects with people around him. I think he longs to be accepted and be a part of groups, and I think he does. I think, like, those moments where he's like, tells Batista that he sees him as a true friend. I believe all that stuff. I do. He's not human in the traditional sense. He doesn't feel feelings in the traditional sense.
Right.
And that is when the show is great. You mentioned earlier, I think you said something in DM about watching that scene from season 5 where he beats that guy to death in the bathroom.
Yeah.
That's literally one of my favorite scenes of the entire show.
Oh, me too.
In fact, I would go as far as to say season 5, episode 1, it might be my favorite standalone episode of the entire series.
Yeah.
Because his opening monologue is fucking incredible. That scene in the bathroom is so poetic and beautiful. I mean, it's fucked up, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, where he like murders this man, he's covered in blood, and then he looks in the mirror, and you see, for the first time, you see Harry in the reflection of the mirror, and then Harry says, "That's the first human thing I've seen you do all day." It's like one of my favorites. I was like, that is the coolest fucking thing. Like, this is his human moment, and his human moment is murdering someone in cold blood because everything around him is falling apart.
Right.
I love that.
God.
When the show embraces that part, the aspect, and emphasizes that he is broken, he is fucked up, he is wrong, and he's not doing this to save the world. He's doing this to satisfy his own cravings. Like, that's what I love. That's why I love the show.
Right.
Which is why I don't think he deserves a happy ending, but I think he deserves a satisfying ending. I mean, those are two very different things.
Sure. Yep.
So.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think Original Sin and Resurrection hopefully are all kind of in service of finding that conclusive ending that everybody can be like, not everybody. You're never going to find an ending that everybody is on board for, but like hopefully we can get an ending where not everybody is like
This
flipping
sucks.
cars and shit, you know?
Right, yeah. And we're back. So let's keep going with our general thoughts here. What do you think is up with this guy Deb is dating? It definitely gives me ice truck killer vibes. No?
I think,
And
yeah,
yeah,
I think it's meant to kind of evoke
right? It's got
that.
to. 'Cause it's too similar. He looks kind of like him, and he's also got that like smooth talker, like good guy vibe.
One thing I will say is that I don't know what role he's going to play. Like part of me is like, is this guy going to end up on Dexter's table at some point? But he also does seem pretty genuine. Like he seems like a nice dude.
Yeah, he seems like a
But
nice guy.
he's made a point several times in 2 episodes now to reference his father
Yeah, what's that about?
and how he's super ultra rich or whatever. And I'm like, is he somehow connected to the cartel or something?
Or
Like,
what if
is this,
his father the guy that's been kidnapping the boys?
or that, or maybe he's the one who's been kidnapping the boys. Like he seems like another obvious, like a potential
Hmm.
suspect for the
Yeah.
kidnapper.
Yeah.
So I want to commend this season for doing something that I feel like a lot of the seasons of Dexter don't really do.
Hmm.
I mean, some of them do clearly, but like uh, they have a mystery kind of at the center. They're not like spending a ton of time on, but there's but my brain is constantly like, who is this fucking guy? And they've introduced so
Hmm.
many characters that I think an argument could be made for like, it being
Yeah.
them, or like my brain, like I've gone through, and I have one theory that I think is like, I'm like 80, I'm like 70% sure that it's this one character, but like it could be this character, this character, this character, or this character. You know what I mean? Like
What's what's
there's
your
not always
big
people
what's
doubt.
your big theory? Do you want to talk about it here or no?
Yeah, we could. We talked. I mean, I think we talked about it last time. I think it's Brian. Um, I think it's his brother. Uh,
Yeah,
but
but didn't we say that would be so then we wouldn't have a conclusion to this killer. This killer would just get away.
uh, yeah, which is also there's a couple things that have come up, and I was actually talking to John about this earlier, and he I don't want to take credit for this, but he
Sure.
brought up something that I thought was really interesting that I hadn't thought about yet. Because I don't know if did you watch the kind of like next week on preview of.
Oh, no, I should. Why haven't I done that yet?
Yeah, so it seems like they're slowly starting to kind of highlight. So you in the second episode, we got that guy who was shot in the parking lot. That was Dexter's first crime scene. In
Yeah.
episode 4, we got there was the male prostitute who was on
Hmm.
the beach.
Yeah.
Um, and it seems like they're starting to maybe suggest that those are connected, and that there's someone going around killing people who are like drug users.
Yeah.
And
Was the first guy a drug user?
yeah, because he had a crack pipe. I remember that
Oh,
being
that's right. Yes.
um
Okay.
so there's it seems like they're starting to suggest that there's a second like serial killer of some kind operating, and we've been so
Yeah.
focused on the kidnapper that now we haven't really noticed that these things might be connected, but I think they're starting to kind of like highlight that now. So
So
like,
maybe the kidnapper goes free, but Dexter catches the.
yeah, but John also was like, what if the Brian thing is actually being built up so that we find out that, so maybe Harry figures out who the killer is, but Dexter doesn't. So
And he
now
doesn't want to tell Dexter because.
Harry knows that Brian is also a murderer and he's out there, but he doesn't tell
Yeah.
Dexter about it, kind of thing. So like maybe
Ooh.
the kidnapper thing is more of kind of like Harry's end game, and this other drama happening over here is where Dexter's end game for the season is going.
Well, that's a good point too, because we specifically get that flashback in episode 4, is it?
Mhm.
Where Brian is pulling the tails off
Yeah,
of the lizards and he's like
yeah,
taking the parts, like
yeah,
pulling them apart.
and there's also there's also this idea that um and I don't remember, again, this wasn't my original thought, but somebody pointed out that um Brian seems to be showing signs of psychopathy before Laura is murdered in the thing,
I made
which would explain why when Harry goes into the shipping container after Laura's death, he walks out with Dexter and leaves Brian behind.
Yeah,
and that might be part of the reason why maybe Brian is doing all this, not to target Dexter, but more to like torment Harry some way.
Right.
So like those all seem very plausible to me, but I'm also like, Tanya has to serve some purpose, and I don't know what that purpose is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Spencer is something's got to happen with Spencer. Yeah, because he's not around in the original series. So like,
do you think
those characters?
Do you think Spencer's kid gets taken by?
All I'll say is watch what next week on.
Okay,
they pretty much spoil that. Yeah, that's coming.
Okay.
I will also say that they made a really big point of like highlighting Captain Spencer's family troubles.
Right, yeah.
Specifically, he hates his ex-wife because she cheated on him, and she's about to marry this dude that she cheated on him with.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, and maybe this is not related at all to the kidnapper or related at all to the drug murders or anything, but like, what if Captain Spencer ends up doing something rash, like murdering his ex-wife, and then ends up in Dexter's kill table? Because like, look, as much as they have a lot of, they're spinning a lot of plates right now, but like, I'm not gonna lie, they've got Patrick Dempsey, they've got Sarah Michelle Gellar. I want to see one of them end up on Dexter's table. Like, I don't know what the circumstances would be. I think Captain Spencer seems like the most logical suspect right now, but like, they've got these big name actors. They usually cast big name actors in the roles of villains on this show.
Right.
Kill scenes are like the best part of the show. Like, I want to see Patrick Dempsey on a kill table. That would be fucking rad. And to me right now, the obvious path forward is that he's going to freak out over his son being kidnapped. Maybe he blames his ex-wife, and then he murders his ex-wife or something. That's my guess. Purely theorizing here, but like, they made a point to highlight his family troubles.
Right. So. Yeah, that's very fair. But yeah, I have a note somewhere in here about how Brian, like, he's clearly showing signs of being a psychopath before Dexter ever does. Dexter feels bad about the lizard that has its tail broken off.
It seems like they're trying to like paint a picture of like, well, Brian was always a psychopath and Dexter became a psychopath.
Yeah, he was made into one.
Yeah. So
today I watched the Dissecting Dexter with Molly Brown, and I loved it. I think it was the best Dissecting Dexter so far.
Wait, do you mean the final cut?
Or sorry, did I say Dissecting Dexter?
I was like, Dissecting Dexter is a great podcast. I highly recommend, but Molly Brown was not on it.
Right? Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Dexter: The Final Cut. And I really enjoyed it. Also, Tyler Posey was on the second episode of it, and I'm like, dude, is he gonna be a guest star? Like, let's go! I would love it. I love Tyler Posey. Like, he is.
I'm not familiar with him. What is his claim to fame?
Did you ever watch Teen Wolf?
I did not. No, is that the one?
It was like MTV. It's on MTV.
No,
dude,
I did not.
It was like, you should actually watch it. It was like surprisingly good. It is kind of like young adult-ish, but it's actually like really good. There's a lot of like storylines that kind of like interweave and kind of tie in together, and there's big twists where you're like, no way, that's that guy. And Tyler Posey is the main kid. He's in high school, and he finds out he gets bitten by somebody in the middle of night when he's coming home from lacrosse practice or something. Yeah. And he becomes a werewolf, and there's all this supernatural drama that we saw from shows around that time.
He looks like he could be a dead ringer for Brian.
Right? Yeah. And so I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I really, really like him as an actor. He got, like, the first season of Teen Wolf, you'd be like, whatever. But as you keep going, he becomes, like, a really good actor.
Why was he on Final Cut, I guess?
Because he's, like, a Dexter super fan. He's like he proclaims that he's, like, this massive Dexter fan. And because he's a famous actor, he probably had some connections and was able to get onto the show. Yeah. But I think it would be super interesting if he was like a cameo or something, because I love him. So
that could happen. You know, I don't see it on his IMDb, but maybe that's just under wraps.
Could be.
But yeah, you never know.
But yeah, I thought it was funny that he was a super fan because I'm such a big fan of his. So I'm like, oh, he likes Dexter, cool.
Nice.
But Molly on my note here says dissecting Dexter, so I keep wanting to say it. But Molly on the final cut was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
There was one thing I was really disappointed, and obviously this is the almost like marketing answer that I'm sure she has to give. But they asked like, what did you try to mimic about Jennifer Carpenter? Like, did you watch her a lot?
She just said the curse words, basically.
She's like, the swearing. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but like, what else? Like, what else about Jennifer Carpenter are you
I will say this about
for?
that answer. I had the same thought. Obviously, everybody knows we want her to cuss, and that's like,
and it's like the obvious one.
Like, that's an obvious answer. But like, one thing she did point out, which I think is important here, because I see a lot of people bitching about it, is a lot of people seem to like not see. They're like, this doesn't seem like Deb at all. And she highlighted the fact that people, especially like young people in high school specifically, in their high school years,
different.
They're very different people than their adult selves, and they can also go through dramatic like roller coasters of like personality shifting. And when you combine that fact with the fact that she's feeling all of this like abandonment from her father, and she feels alienated from her brother, and she's just like this whole rebellion thing is basically Harry's fault,
right?
And so like she feels like she has a lot of freedom to kind of like make the character her own without having to mimic Jennifer Carpenter too much,
right? Because there's going to be a big life-turning event coming up.
Yeah, and I
think
fairly
soon.
I think by the time we get to the end of Original Sin, whether it's this season or however many seasons they do, I think the connection will be there. I just I don't think it's necessarily fair to like see where she's at right now at this point in her life and be like, well, this doesn't seem like the Deb I know at all, because like it's kind of a quote unquote origin story. I hate using that term, but like,
sure,
this is the connective tissue. And I brought this up a while the other day when I was talking to somebody else about it, but like, people like to point to certain flashbacks we saw in the original series of Deb, and they're like, she was like this kind of like nerdy, awkward kid. And I was like, yeah, those flashbacks was like when she was like 15 years old.
Pre-Original Sin. Yeah.
Like even pre-Original Sin. Like she probably was like that. And then she hit a certain point in high school. She started to really react to this whole thing going on between Harry and Dexter. And she probably just like flipped a switch and became this like rebellious teenager, which is something a lot of people go through. So I think she's doing a great job. I have faith that they know this character. They know where she needs to end up. So like, I think they'll get there.
Trust the process.
For now, trust the process. Let's just kind of like enjoy the ride. I mean, the one thing, she's already making bad romantic decisions, and that is
right. Yeah, she's definitely doing that for sure. That's textbook Deb. And the other thing I liked from Final Cut is it sounds like she's an actual Dexter fan. Like she was saying that she was doing a rewatch when they emailed her, which means she's seen it before.
I really liked her.
That's really cool. I like that.
I really liked her journey and her attitude and her personality and stuff. And I always thought it was really funny that she posted on Instagram because she was rumored to be in talks to be on the show, and so I was following her on Instagram, and she posted it a little bit later. But she got the news that she was going to be cast as Deb while she was at Taylor Swift's concert, and she like stepped out. She like left the arena like on her phone, like what? And then she just starts like, she's like, "Are you serious? Are you fucking serious?" She starts like screaming, but you can hear Taylor Swift in the background.
Like, can you imagine what a moment like?
And then she was like, "That was like the best night of my life."
Oh,
like, I got this news, and then I turned around and I went back in, and then she's like, I went back the next night because I was just like over the moon excited. I was like, that's cool. Her whole journey has been great. I really like her. I think her performance, especially in this episode that we're going to talk about tonight, episode 5, I think she's great. So yeah, I think trust the process. We'll get there. I think she's a great actress. I think she'll justify her casting. With no problem.
She also makes a good point in the final cut. She talks about how when we see Dexter in the main series, he's already manufactured a way
Hmm.
for himself to be a good brother. For the most part,
Yeah,
he makes
yeah.
mistakes and stuff, but for the most part, he has figured out
He's found the
what it
formula that
means.
works for him.
Yeah, exactly. And in Original Sin, he hasn't quite nailed that down yet. And I hadn't really thought about this before she said it. I mean, I guess I had on some level, but I hadn't thought about it deeply. But he's like missing her volleyball game, missing her at the grave, and stuff like that. And obviously, there's a lot going on with Dexter and Harry. But I think it's such good writing to show, because she's right. In the main series, even from the beginning, one of the things that makes us like Dexter is it seems like he cares about his sister.
I
And
think she is legitimately, over time anyways, may not be that way necessarily. I think he does care about an Original Sin,
I
but like
I think, yeah,
it
I think
becomes
he
very
does.
clear over time that if there is nobody else on this planet that he cares about, it's Deb.
It's Deb, yeah, for
And that
sure.
is so endearing, and we feel that. That's why the end of the show, the original show, hurts so much. I think pissed off so
Yeah,
many people is because they obviously chose to let her pay the price,
right. And
and which is another reason why you shouldn't want Dexter to get off the fucking hook. Like,
yeah, and that's
yeah,
fair. That's very, very fair. And I just like how in Original Sin he is like constantly dropping the ball. Like even in the first couple episodes, he like doesn't really know how to like hug her, and then
yeah,
he finally does. He's like, oh, maybe family does matter. And then the party is like the first time we see him like really like stand up for her, and she's like,
I love
what the
that scene.
fuck? Yeah, it's
The
such
more
a
I
good
think about it,
scene.
I love that whole scene. I mean, I know it was kind of like meant to build up towards this moment where he almost snaps and kills someone, but you
Yeah,
remember that he was doing it in defense of Deb.
right. Yeah, and
Um,
she doesn't know it at the time, but he kind of tells her when they get out of there.
Such a great
And
moment, and that's why I also love the interaction they have outside the party where
yeah.
he's like, I came in that room and he had his pants off and you were passed out, and she's like, oh,
Oh,
and then she's
yeah.
like, hold my fucking hair back. I love
Yeah.
that.
It's
Such a
such a
good
good scene.
such a good
Such a good
moment.
scene. And then, we're seeing it in episode 5 where they eat the pot brownies together. We'll talk about
Yeah,
that
we'll
more in
talk
a
about that.
minute. But
Uh,
it's and she says like this is the first time that I felt like we're bonding. And
yeah,
she's like, "Why don't we talk more?" And
it's
she's
all
like,
she
"Talk about
wants.
what?" Yeah.
It's all she wants.
I'm
She
like,
she
"Man,
literally bailed on her friends, her volleyball team, to hang
I
out with Dexter,
know." It
and
was
you don't even think about it because like when I was watching, it's like, oh, she's like, oh, this is funny. She wants to see her brother high and like laugh
yeah.
at it, right? But like, no, she abandoned her, a high school girl, abandoned plans with her best friends in favor of staying home and hanging out with her brother.
Yeah, I watched
Speaks
episode
volumes.
I watched both of these episodes twice, 4 and
Hmm.
5, and I was rewatching 5 this morning, and I noticed that when I mean I guess I had kind of noticed it the first time, but I noticed it more the second time when she's like about to leave to go hang out with her friends, and he's like, "No, please don't go." And
She's
she
she's
puts
like
her keys down. She's like, "All right." And I'm like,
she's like
this
finally.
yeah, she's like, it's like this really shows how badly she wants to be part of this family, and Molly
Yeah.
even brings that up in the final cut. Um and yeah, I love the relationship these two obviously have from the main series, but also the way that it's kind of taking form in Original Sin I think is really important because she also brings up how or I should say, Molly brings up how interesting it is that Deb isn't scared of Dexter. Like, she's kind of like, you fucking dork, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, she's kind of like, you just weird nerd, like, golden child boy. But then Harry is, like, terrified of Dexter. Like, he is
Yeah.
legitimately scared of
He's scared
Dexter.
of what he created.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so funny how the two are kind of at odds, where Deb sees this innocence in Dexter that really isn't there.
which is really important because this whole episode, we'll talk about episode 5, but the
Yeah.
episode ends with this whole moment where Dexter's like, he realizes the thing that he misses about his foster mother was that she
seeing the
saw
good in him.
She saw goodness in him, and Deb is very much that person. She sees good in him. She does not see any of the shit that Harry sees. She does not see the darkness or anything like that. In fact, and she doesn't all the way up until the season 6 of or season 7, I guess, of the original show.
Yeah.
So like, I don't even know if Dexter realizes that yet, but he's planted the seed. He has said, this is what I loved about her.
Right.
This is what I missed the most about her. But he's like, why are you not paying attention to your sister who's right here, who clearly is also the exact same way?
Right. It's so good.
It's good stuff. Good stuff.
The last thing I have in general thoughts here is that the show in the main series, the Harry, he has been messing around with like all of his CIs. Like he's been messing around with like a lot of them. And this show kind of paints it like he has like this love affair with Laura, and it's kind of the first time that this has happened. It's like, no, he's not like a loyal husband.
I have a theory about that.
Let's hear it.
Because in the original show, like you said, like they paint him as like this just like big man slut, right?
Yeah.
I think that could still happen. But here's they don't paint in the original series is like the order of events, because like he continues working as a detective long after Laura dies.
Well, wasn't there a CI before Laura that he was?
They don't tell you. All Deb has in the original series is a long list of CIs that she's going through. Okay. She talks to a bunch of others before she eventually realizes who Laura Moser is. But it doesn't tell you like. And then there's the one who's like, who talks about how she was sleeping with him and whatnot, and so that he did this, but like I have a feeling a lot of those infidelities happen after Laura dies, and he just becomes this kind of like, like that breaks him, and like when she dies, it kind of breaks him. I don't know. I could be totally wrong. But there's also one thing, and they have an opportunity. They have an opportunity to retcon this a little bit, but they could also tie things together, because the moment it's in season 4 when Deb realizes that Laura Moser is Dexter's biological. I always get fuzzy when I try to remember the specifics of this, even though I've seen it 100 times. But she's talking to one of the CIs.
Yeah.
And the CI says that she dropped Harry off one day at another CI's house or something like that. And she drives Deb to Laura Moser's house. And she obviously has the flashback of when Brian brought her here.
Oh, yeah.
In season 1. And that's kind of how she connects all the dots.
Right.
So, are they going to introduce a situation where that CI drops Harry off at her house? Like, are they going to connect that tissue? Because I think that CI in the original series said she was sleeping with him. Oh no, it was the CI who said she was trying to sleep with him, and he never said yes. He never went for it. But she said something. I think she said something along the lines of, but there was another CI that he was interested in or whatever, and I even dropped him off at her house one day or something after we did a job.
Yeah, okay.
I could be a little fuzzy on some of those details, but I'm wondering if they're going to completely ignore that.
Yeah, somehow she has to know about Laura, so there's got to be some sort of crossover there.
I like to think that the creators of the show, the writers, probably have an encyclopedia-like knowledge of what they've already done before, but you also got to realize that some of these things are probably things that they're like, either they don't think it's that important, or maybe they've forgotten some of the things that they did and they're not really worried too much about. I don't know. I don't know. That seems like such a small thing that they could just completely ignore it. I don't know.
Sure.
But yeah, my theory right now is that Laura is the first infidelity, and then after she dies, he just becomes a huge man slut.
Right.
Like that's my theory.
That's fair. Let's go into, or unless, do you have any other like general thoughts that kind of don't fit into a category in particular?
I think we've gotten all that out of our system early.
Okay, earlier. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about episode 4, Fender Bender. Mm-hmm. This episode I'm just gonna be honest. I did not like this episode.
Interesting.
I watched it after we had talked last week, and I felt so like unsatisfied about it. And then I
I'm
watched it
sure
again, and I was just kind of like, it was fine. Like it wasn't. It just felt like it didn't really do much.
it's a
And
building block. It's a building
yeah,
block episode. Like, I don't
yeah,
think there's anything egregiously wrong with this episode. I mean,
no,
I'm not gonna lie. I'm writing my review for no, I wrote my review for this one last week. I was pretty pleased with it.
okay, because
But
I watched it and I was like. I feel like there's a lot of, Dexter researching Mad Dog, Deb. There is a good moment with Deb where she yells at Harry about the truck, and he's like, "A boy died," and she's like, "Well, how the hell was I supposed to know that?" And
yeah,
that was a great scene. Also, I
it
think
was
it's
an
kind of
awful thing to
funny.
throw at a teenage girl's face. By the way, like,
Yeah, for sure. It is, but I
like,
like the moment. I like the moment where Harry leans in. He's like, "Are you on something?" And she goes like, "Fuck you" or whatever, and storms off. And
that was
he,
not the time to be also grilling her about drug use. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
he
for
just,
sure. But I also think it's telling that him as a cop, like any other parent, if you were a cop and like I've had friends that had dads that were cops, and
yeah.
when they got caught with cocaine or weed or anything, they were nailed to the fucking wall.
I feel like
And
Harry feels like he can't even do that with her though, because he knows he's failing her, and like he feels like so much of this behavior is his fault, that
that
he's letting her just get away with everything.
but also I think all of his focus is so squarely on Dexter dealing with this much bigger problem that he doesn't have time to like punish her or anything else for any drug use, because he's like, my son is a serial killer. And I think that's such good writing because that really says a lot about not only who Deb is now, but who we know Deb to be later on in the series, and kind of the weird relationship or memory she has of Harry,
Right.
because he's really not there a lot. Like he's not really helping her with much of anything. And it's just a little moment in this scene where he like is about to go after her. You see him like start to walk towards her, and then he turns around and starts talking to Dexter again. And I'm
Mm,
like, that is a perfect like physical representation of what is happening throughout all of Deb's life.
yeah.
And I'm like, that was really good writing because it
Yeah.
conveyed all of that in like an instant.
That was a very dynamic scene. A lot of stuff going
Yeah.
on under the hood, I suppose, uh,
Yeah.
for both of those characters.
Yeah.
Dexter was very much just kind of like a spectator in
Right.
that
Yeah,
scene,
for sure.
um, which was cool.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, why do you like this episode? Because
um,
I think there's good moments. It just didn't really move the needle for me.
I like this episode because we talked about this before. This is the reference, right? We talked about this before the recording.
Mm,
That the one of the most integral parts of the character in the original series was that they worked very hard, very quickly to make the audience sympathetic to Dexter, who was very clearly doing something wrong,
right.
by showing his aversion to hurting children,
Right.
and how angry it makes him seeing other people do this. And this is if there are any people who are new to the series who are jumping on board with Original Sin, this was the episode where they did that for newbies, where you see Dexter's very visceral reaction to seeing a dead child, and a murdered child specifically.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so the whole opening scene, the chaos of that crime scene was really, I think, was really well done. And just Dexter just being like, he's like basically he doesn't know how to describe it. He's like, I'm having a panic attack. I don't know what's happening. I just looking at the body, which usually doesn't bother me at all. It doesn't register, but like something about
Right.
this is bothering me. And it works twofold, because one, it shows you that he feels something,
Hmm.
and he does not like children being hurt, which I think anybody can sympathize, any normal person can sympathize with. And two, for people who are familiar with his history, it creates a connection there, because he doesn't even realize it, but it's probably because of what happened to him at a very, very young age, because he has no memory of what happened to his mother. He has no memory of what happened. That he doesn't even know that he had a brother. He doesn't know what happened.
Yeah.
So like
and that gets brought up in this episode too.
Yeah, they're starting to plant the seeds. So he's having all of these emotions for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really smart way to kind of like tie that in, like, because the show has not done a lot of stuff that kind of like
endears you to
yeah, at this point, yeah, this show has not done a ton to endear you to him as a serial killer. It also, the series as a whole has not done a ton of stuff where that's dealt with like violence against children. So this was pretty dark.
Yeah, for sure.
So like, which I think it's always neat because it takes place in Miami, which is a very vibrant, bright, loud, happy, not happy, but like,
yeah,
like,
tropical,
listen to the soundtrack of the show. It's like hopping, right? Like, and then you juxtapose that against this child who is murdered and hung from a bridge. Like, what the fuck?
Right.
So like, it immediately sets him off. It immediately set me off as like, I want to see this guy. I want to see Dexter get this guy on a table. Although I've mentioned already why I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was really interesting. And I also, I mean, I liked all the stuff with Mad Dog, and I liked him biting off more than he could chew.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about how there's been this like noticeable escalation from Nurse Mary to like taking huge risks. Correct, and I think now that all of that is kind of in service to getting us to where we're at the end of this episode, which is he got really cocky really fast, and now he's paying for it.
I did like him kind of meeting his match and trying to find a way to like overcome it, and just being like too ahead of himself, and it leads to what we see in episode 5 where he's like, I gotta figure out a better way to do this.
It's all in service of making him the really neat monster that he describes himself as.
Yeah, and I think this was a good scene of him, like like we see with the scene with Nurse Mary, even from the main series when they show that flashback, is he's like very messy. He's very like all over the place, like chasing her around the room and just like being hella like messy about it. And he's kind of got this thing where he thinks we even see it in the was the first episode where he's like describing the crime scene, like the guy was standing here, that's why there's no blood spatter, and they're like, no shit, Sherlock, and it kind of like humbles him, takes him down a peg. And
there's a lot of him being humbled in this season.
Yeah, and I think that's the way it should be. I think like that's the whole point of Original Sin, is that we need to see Dexter at his roots when he was like fumbling around in the dark and not really knowing what he's doing. And
I think they struck a really good balance between him struggling, but also you can tell you still see the Dexter that we know. Like, you can still see like kind of the mad genius underneath it all, and you can tell when he's like operating on all, like when he's firing on all cylinders, and he's like, oh, he's in his element now. He's doing good. Like, you still get those moments, but like you also see all
Ferrer when the bullet goes by his head, he like had planned that out. He knew.
You see all that stuff, and then we'll talk about the very end of episode 5 too. Like, he's in, like he's locked in, and he's like proving himself. So like this, I like this whole thing with Mad Dog going into episode 5, because it even kind of recontextualized the Tony Ferrer kill in episode 3, where I thought, okay, he's got this jump to like from like barely knows what he's doing to taking these huge risks makes a little more sense now. He's letting his like, he got the green light from Harry, and now he's like, oh hell yeah, and he's just going nuts. Right, he's taking huge risks, and this episode leads us up to that catching up to him, and suddenly he fucked up, and now he's got to figure out how to fix it.
Right.
Which I think is pretty cool in the after. I also like this episode because there's 2 scenes in particular that I think were great nostalgia. One, when they send him over to a different crime scene because he's struggling with the kid, right? And suddenly he's at this other crime scene where he like. He's realized, okay, I'm basically forensic. I am forensics here. Like, I'm an intern, but like I get to do my thing here. Yeah. And so he has some one-on-one with LaGuerta, which is great. but it also, they did a lot of stuff here again to humanize him. He has that great conversation with Clark, Officer Sanders, I guess, in the car ride over.
Yeah.
And that was really nice. But I think one of my favorite moments of this episode is towards the end of the scene where they're getting ready. He's done all of his forensic stuff, and he's like, "All right, go ahead and you can go ahead and take the body." And the coroner won't touch the body because he says he doesn't want to get AIDS, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And immediately,
he's like, "I'll help you lift him."
Yeah, immediately, Dexter and Clark both jump in, and one grabs the arms, one grabs the legs, and they both treat him like a human being. Like, well, fuck you. If you're not going to do it, we're going to do it. And like, they respect this person who lost their life and lifts them, out. It was just like, and the music changes so subtly there to like kind of emphasize that idea of when this dude is treating him, like dehumanizing this person,
right.
Even Dexter is able to respect this person. And,
right.
It makes me like Officer Sanders a lot. I hope they don't kill him because I like him a lot so far.
Yeah, and, is he in the main show at all?
No, I don't think so. I think he's a original character here, and I don't know if he's gonna play a big part. But they did they did end up mentioning a lot about his backstory, about his brother being killed.
Yeah, that's got to come up somehow.
I don't know if it's coming up, if it's being told so like Dexter can eventually like track this guy down who murdered his brother, or if it's coming up just because they wanted to once again endear Dexter to the audience and show that he really has a soft spot for kids. Whatever it may be. I like the character, and I hope they continue to use him like this. So I like that scene a lot. And of course, the scene with the melons.
Oh God, yes.
Tanya's melons.
I have a note about this. So Dexter uses the cantaloupe when discussing the murder with LaGuardia, and he has to use it's like ketchup or something.
It's a ketchup. It's the most primitive version of his elaborate blood spatter room that he has in the original series.
Yeah.
Now that I'm looking at it, that must I've never really thought about it, but that's probably not something that all police departments come equipped with. It seems very much like now they've showed it here that Dexter kind of created on his own and was
right,
because he doesn't even have a room dedicated to it. He just kind of sets up plastic wrap, kind of like a kill room in this room, and then uses really primitive tools to kind of demonstrate how a person's head might react to hitting the ground, and the blood spatter with the ketchup and stuff. And it's is this just the beginning? And they're eventually, he eventually comes on full time, they're like, we're going to make you a room where you can do this for real. And I was like, that's so cool. It was such a great moment. And then Masuka's little hands off Tanya's melons. I was like, this is so childish of me, but I loved it.
It was so good.
That was legitimately Masuka's first, I think, great Masuka moment. of the show. Yeah,
for sure. And I kind of wonder, not wonder, I guess. So later on, he uses watermelons, right, to do this same thing. Does he
in
not?
The original series?
He I know he has his mannequin head that he uses eventually, but don't we see him use watermelons and stuff? Because I think it's funny that he chose cantaloupe, because cantaloupe doesn't have anything that splatters. It doesn't have anything that
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't specifically remember the watermelon thing, but I could be wrong. Okay. But you're right. I mean, makes you wonder if there happened to be 2 cantaloupes in the fridge, and he's like, I'll use these.
Right. And what was the thing he attaches to the bottom of it? Was it
It was because he slaps it onto the bottom. It's like a pad or something, just to give it some extra cushion, and then drops it so that it lands on that, so that you don't see. Yeah. The cantaloupe doesn't break.
Right. Yeah, it was funny. I was just like, oh, this is such an early version of what we see him do later.
That's the good stuff.
It was so funny. It was so funny.
So yeah, I loved both of those scenes.
And talking about the one with LaGuardia where she's like, do your thing, and she's like, is that an educated guess? And he's like, he says it's an educated guess. She's like, I don't need an educated guess. I need real
so
forensics.
Proud of himself.
Yeah.
And then she's like, I need real fucking forensics. And I was like, ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe poor choice of words.
Yeah. And the Michael C. Hall monologue is, it would take LaGuardia a while to appreciate my particular set of skills.
Yeah.
And I love this because it works on two levels. It's like eventually LaGuerta learns to like trust him when he says
Yeah,
something is a certain way.
yeah,
She'll be like, okay, I assume that you've thought through this and have evidence. I'm not going to bother you with the minutia of it. But then later, of course, he kills her. And so that's
technically Deb
also,
kills her.
yeah, yeah, I guess that's true. I guess that's true. So, yeah, I think it's funny that I don't know. She's such a good character in Original Sin where I'm like I can see how she gets to where she gets
Yeah,
to in the main series, and I can see how her and Dexter get to the point where they have the relationship that they
yep.
do in the main series.
I
I
also
think
think
they've
that
done that really well.
I think Christina Milian as LaGuerta is fantastic.
Oh,
Every
spot on.
and I liked her in episode 4. Episode 5, I was like, God, she is good. She is
Yeah.
just like spot on. Like
Yep.
maybe she's right up there with James Martinez as like as Batista as
Yeah.
far as like great casting for a younger version.
Yeah.
Fantastic, and she's doing a fantastic job with the performance too. So like I'm into it, and it
Yeah.
sounds like after episode 5 that she's going to be working more closely with Harry, which I think is going to be exciting, and it makes me
Right.
wonder because we didn't find out about it. Does Harry have a little fling with her at some point? Because like if he
Maybe.
really is a big hoe at some point, and he's working closely with LaGuerta, I could see him hoeing it up with LaGuerta at some
I could
point.
see it happening for sure, for sure.
Big hound dog, yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll see what
But
happens.
speaking of Harry, he goes to Camilla and checks on the removal of Dexter from all case files.
Mm-hmm.
We know in the main series, we know this, I guess, but I can't remember how much we knew, like how much we knew from the main show about Dexter, like not remembering his mom. I also can't quite remember when Dexter finds out about the shipping container. Was that in
It's in the first
season 2?
season. It's
Oh,
season
was
1. I
it?
mean,
Okay.
it's all tied to Brian. Like he by the end of season 1, he remembers more or less remembers what happened and knows what's happening. And he even confronts Camilla about it, and Camilla admits that she destroyed the files.
Right.
So this was a nice like tie-in moment. This is another
Okay.
one of those moments though too where people who might be starting with Original Sin are going to be confused because
Right.
people who are starting Original Sin don't even yet know about the shipping container.
Right.
But yeah, this is one of those things where it definitely jives with what they did in the original show.
Yeah. Speaking of the shipping container, doesn't the actor that plays young Dexter feel really old for the role? Like,
I've seen some people point that out too. I think there's a number of reasons for this. One, it's just the way they've written the story. They want the character to be more attuned and kind of present in the scene, and there's maybe a little bit more quote unquote acting to be done from the child, and it's just easier to do with children who are a little bit older.
Right.
So they probably just let themselves have a little bit of wiggle room there.
Yeah.
But there were moments, specifically with the child actor who played Dexter, definitely looked younger in the original series. But you do get brief glimpses of Brian literally in the shipping container, and he looks about the age we see him here.
Age. Yeah, for sure.
So the implication is that because he does call him baby brother, so he is younger, and I do still get the feeling that Dexter is definitely noticeably younger than Brian. But he is definitely noticeably older than the child they got him to play in the original series.
Yeah.
This is just one of those things. You got to kind of they made the choice for they had reasons for doing this.
Sure. Yeah.
Also probably legal reasons in terms of like how long actors under a certain age can work on film sets and stuff like that.
Yeah, could be.
So also the show has always been kind of wishy-washy with like how fast children age, because like,
I know. There's been like multiple actors for young Dexter and stuff. So
Harrison, between season 7 and 8, which was only supposed to be like an 6 to 8 month gap, looked like he aged like 2 years.
Oh, really?
And he was suddenly speaking when he wasn't even old enough to speak in season 7. You know what I mean? Like that's one thing that's always kind of, I was like, if you hadn't bothered to put like a timetable on this and told us how long it's actually been, I would have been totally forgiving. But you told us explicitly how much time has passed since the last time we saw Harrison. So this is bothering me.
Right, for sure.
But it's whatever.
For sure. The last kind of the last thing I have about episode 4 is Dexter's on the boat with Mad Dog, and he says the Michael C. Hall monologue is so good. There he was, a professional killer in the twilight of his career, and me in my beginning.
Yeah.
And I love this moment where it's just like, yeah, this Mad Dog guy is on his way out, and Dexter is just starting his, and it's kind of, he gets to like sit next to him and like ask him questions, and Mad Dog isn't really forthcoming with a lot of answers and stuff.
He's speaking in metaphors.
Yeah, it would have been interesting if Dexter could have gotten him on his table and asked him like questions about his serial killer. That would have been a great scene.
I was starting to wonder, and I don't think they're going to do this now, because now that we've seen episode 5, I think we're kind of past the Mad Dog debacle at this point. But I was starting to wonder if this was going in the direction of, is Mad Dog even a killer? Like, I was starting to wonder, because like some of the evidence that Dexter was using to justify this target seemed
he was reaching.
Loose. It was a bit of a reach, which I think also speaks to his his eagerness and his overconfidence. You know what I mean? So I was like, are we going to find out not only did he let this guy get away and get hit by a car, that he wasn't even guilty to begin with?
Well, that's what I thought. There's
not a lot of physical evidence.
Right. Yeah, and even when Dexter was telling Harry about it, he says, like, he had these prints of, this guy who is like a family man and he's going to kill him and all this stuff. And the thing that got me is Dexter specifically says, it's Occam's razor, Dad.
Yeah, and I was like, Dexter, what if it's
doesn't Yeah, and Dexter, like older Dexter, he does not go by Occam's razor. Like, Occam's razor is not enough to...
That is not satisfying the code at all.
Right. So, yeah.
And maybe they still do. Maybe they still touch on this. Maybe we'll hear about this Mad Dog thing again, or maybe this is just that we're moving on. But they said the FBI wasn't even able to like prove that he was responsible for these killings or whatever. And you know what? Maybe he did just foreclose on people's houses. Like, maybe that's really all he ever did. Maybe that wasn't a metaphor at all.
Right.
So I'm, part of me is maybe a little disappointed, because I feel like they could have gone that direction. That would have just been one more thing to add to the pile of fuck ups.
Right.
But it is what it is. He probably was guilty, and he gets hit by a car.
Yeah.
At the end. And I think that was a cool scene. I was like, is he really just relying on smashing this guy over the head with a guitar to like...
Let's talk about that, because that is my final note for the episode. Is he ties the body up with like twine. He doesn't even use plastic. Like, tie the body down first. All you did was hit him with a guitar. He's not going to be out for very long.
Yeah.
And then when they're fighting and like Dexter almost gets suffocated and all this stuff, and Dexter has this guitar and he lifts it up to hit him, and Mad Dog says, "No, not the Clapton." And Dexter turns and hits it on the ground. I'm like, why? Why didn't you hit him?
I honestly don't know. I don't know.
I don't know what that was.
Like, I mean, it could literally just be I mean, it might be. This is one of those things where it's like, okay, I don't know what the point of this was, but like at the same time, like, he is human being, and sometimes you make weird decisions in the moment. You know what I mean? Like, maybe he was just like, I'm so pissed at this guy that he's attacked me, that I would rather torture him by watching him like smash his favorite guitar in front of him.
Yeah,
as just like out of spite in the moment, than actually hit him in the face with it.
Yeah.
Which was a bad decision. He should have hit him in the face with it. But it was pretty funny. I liked the whole, no, not the Clapton. As pretty good. Either way, it was a debacle. The whole thing was a mess.
Sure.
Which was the point.
Yeah,
and,
it was the point.
And I thought it was fun. It was fun. It was a fun scene. I would have loved to see that actor. I can't remember his last. It's Joe. I'm gonna butcher his last name if I try it, but he's been in a lot of stuff.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, he's one of those actors, like, oh man, he would have been fun kill scene, like a
right.
kill table scene. Like, I feel like that a lot. Like, anytime somebody gets killed off a kill table, I'm like, oh god, the potential would have been so good, but like they can't always go down that way. It'd get boring.
Right, right.
So yeah, I think it was a fun way to end this episode, and especially when I was like, I have to wait a week to figure out how the fuck he's gonna get out of this.
I know, that was excruciating.
Watching week to week is painful, but I
know. Did you also notice that Dexter, on his way out, he grabbed the knife and he was like running with the knife? I was like, what the fuck is he gonna do? Kill him in the middle of the street? Like,
I don't know. Honestly, in a lot of ways, I feel like the car was a godsend.
Oh yeah, he got lucky, dude. Like, super lucky.
Like, what are you gonna do if you catch the guy, drag him through the street by his head? Like, someone's gonna see that happen.
Right. Oh man, what a moment. So that gets us into episode 5. F is for fuck up.
Yep.
This is clearly the best episode of the season.
I think this is a highlight for me as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I would go as far as to say it's my favorite episode of the season for a number of reasons, which we'll talk about.
I mean, fan service alone, like, so many good things.
A lot of good stuff here.
Dexter realizes that he has about 15 minutes until the neighbor identifies this guy, so he rushes back to the house and cleans up using his Miami Metro Tech, which is, very much what we see.
Did you see he was even wearing booties?
Yeah,
and he had the booties on, which I was like, oh, I like that.
Yeah, which made me think, like, does Dexter never worry about, obviously it's a TV show and we have to be like generous with this stuff.
Suspension of disbelief a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, but does he never worry about his hair? Like, his hair could fall out.
My reasoning, and like my own internal reasoning, I guess, however much that matters, has always been that, like, the goal here is to kill someone and eliminate them and make it so that nobody ever even suspects that, like, they were murdered. So, like, why would homicide be combing their house?
There. Yeah.
If there's no body and there's no apparent murder, like, what are they? Even if they find your hair in their house, what are you tying it to? Like, what are you saying I did? You know what I mean?
Right.
So, like, that's kind of what. Obviously, in situations like this, it's probably kind of panic-inducing to realize, like, fuck, I may not have been as clean as I should have been.
Right.
I hope this doesn't bite me in the ass.
Yeah.
But they eventually do decide that this was an accident and that homicide's not going to be involved.
Yeah.
So no harm, no foul, I guess.
Right.
There, so.
Yeah, he gets in there. Luckily, there was only a couple little spots of blood that got through the plastic.
Yeah.
And
he's down on his knees with a toothbrush.
Yeah, just like cleaning that up. I thought that was so funny. And then he has to hide in the trash bags, which I was like, dear God.
Which again, cool under pressure, which is a trait that he's obviously known for, and he even, like, seems pretty proud of himself. Like, he has this, like, smile when he realizes they just walked out of the room and completely missed him.
I love it.
One thing I hate about this fucking show, not the show, like, it's because it is in the 90s. God, I hate 90s lingo. I hate when everyone's like, oh man, that's the bomb, and I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, that was so a little bad.
It's so bad, but like people in the 90s were bad.
People talked like that.
That's how it was.
It's the bomb. Yeah. Oh, so then we get, like, I watched this next scene and I immediately rewound it because I found it so interesting. Harry is pissed at Dexter because he knows that Mad Dog just got hit by a car, and he's like, what the fuck is going on? And
I love Dexter, that he plays it. He's like, so you want to tell me something? Like, it's very much like a normal kind of like father son.
I know. I was just thinking that, like, the whole scene very much felt like a teenager getting in trouble for something stupid they did. Like, I know you crashed the car, like, something like that. And it felt very much like that, but also the way that Dexter reacts and the way that Harry reacts are very different. And I think that is super, super important because Dexter comes back and he's like, yeah, I messed up. It's not a big deal. It's all taken care of. Like, it worked itself out. And Harry stands up off the couch. He's like, you don't fucking understand. You cannot afford one single fuck up. You do not have any degree of availability for any sort of wiggle room when it comes to this. Like you have to be perfect. You have to think through everything. There is not a single thing that you can miss. Otherwise, you're getting the electric chair. If you miss one single thing, you are completely fucked. And I think it's the first time that, I mean, obviously we kind of know this from the main series, but it's the first time it's really put into perspective how crystal clean Dexter has to be. Like how absolutely perfect every single move has to be, because there is no wiggle room for him to fuck up at all. And I just, oh man, it was such a good scene where Harry is just like laying into him. Do you have
grounding him? Grounding
him. Yeah.
It's like, oh my god. He's like, and the funny thing is, he's mad because he didn't kill someone,
right?
Or the way he was supposed to. And I loved that he was like waiting up for him, and he was like listening on the police radio, and he's like,
yep,
yeah. It's just it's such a great scene. And that's one of my favorite things about this show so far, is like really getting to see Harry alive, interacting with Dexter, and like having these moments and reacting to these moments in real time, as opposed to like through a memory or a brief flashback or anything like that. So like this was one of the first times where the code, like Harry's devotion to like sticking to the code is really driven home. Mm-hmm. I love that he brought up the nurse. He's like, we rushed it with the nurse because I was sick. I knew you weren't ready, kind of thing. And I think it was great. And then how that just kind of leads to him being landlocked at home is fantastic, which of course sets us up for the next major event of this episode, which I think is amazing, where he's just like lounging about all day, not knowing what to do. So he decides to eat, because that's what Dexter does. He eats, and he busts into some pot brownies that Deb had made for the volleyball team, not realizing they were pot brownies, and eats six of them.
Eats six of them,
which I feel like is also part of like the kind of, maybe the title of the episode is kind of alluding to this. Fucked up.
Yeah, for sure.
Fucked up. I mean, it is to a lot of things, but
sure. It was great. And I love, like, just before he opens the fridge, he looks over, he's like trying to take his mind off things, right? He's like bouncing the ball against the wall and like just kind of wandering around the house. And then he gets to the kitchen, he sees the plastic wrap in its container, and he like shakes his head and he looks over and he sees like all these knives.
Yep.
And he's like, goes to the fridge.
It's not working.
But yeah, there's an interesting thing that he mentions during this. Dexter distinguishes the difference between, basically leading someone into a car wreck and doing the deed himself. He's like, Mad Dog dying didn't fulfill me in the way that...
I wrote this quote down because I'm pretty sure I'm going to use it in my article, but...
go for it.
He basically says... Killing doesn't feed my dark passenger, or death doesn't feed my dark passenger. Killing does. Right. Which I think maybe he didn't even necessarily realize. He realizes at this point now that like not delivering the killing blow does nothing for him.
Right. And it all comes back to him needing to be in control, which is kind of what comes up when he's doing the pot brownies. She's like, what's the problem? He's like, I'm not in control. Like, he's like, I don't like not being in control. And I was watching this other video today where it was actually this, I don't know what you would call her, like a therapist. She focuses on like the way the brain works and stuff. And she was saying that Dexter as a character, the reason he kills is because he needs control. It stems from him being out of control when he was a child, not being able to save his mom, and all of that was out of his control. And so now he needs control. And, him eating the pot brownies makes him feel out of control. But it's also kind of interesting because him being addicted to killing is also taking control away from him. Like he's not
He's a
controlling
slave
it.
to his
Dark
impulses,
passenger.
or to his
Like
dark passenger.
it's not a good way of controlling. I thought that was a really interesting juxtaposition that I hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I also wondered if Dexter had been the one to hit him with the car, would that have fulfilled him? Or does he need to like stab him through the heart?
I think it would have. I think it probably would have fulfilled him to a degree, but also it would have put like that is the kind of thing that would put him in the eyes of law enforcement, which he could never do. Yeah.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think there is definitely a difference between watching somebody get hit by a car and being the one driving the car. I think that would have made a huge difference for him.
Yeah. I love when they're both high together and he's laying on the couch and he's like, "Do you ever think about pizza?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "It's a circle made out of triangles in a square box." And she's like, "I've never thought about it that way before."
That was some wonderful that was some wonderful high person logic there. It was fantastic. Love this. I love the scene. We talked about it a little bit earlier, like just as a bonding moment between the two.
Yeah.
It was really important. I mean, this is one of my favorite scenes of the episode for sure.
Really? Okay. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to like about this episode. It's not my favorite scene of the episode because there's one later that's pretty damn good. But yeah, just this was the first moment where I think they really had an opportunity to bond as brother and sister.
Yeah.
And I want to see more of this. I want this to be a regular occurring thing for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
I think most people do. And I'm fairly confident that trend will continue. But yeah, it was hilarious. It was endearing. It was touching, and also a little nerve wracking because I was like, he's not in control.
Right.
What's to stop him from saying? Yeah. What the hell is he going to let himself say?
Yeah, because he does say, "What if I did kill somebody hypothetically?" And she was just like, "You're so high."
Yeah. I also liked the next morning when she's like, "How can you eat after last night?" And he's like, "Well, that was then. This is breakfast."
Yeah, I love that line. That was such a good line.
Which he then leaves when Harry gives him. I was like, "What? Eat the breakfast, man! What are you doing?"
Yeah, eat the breakfast.
I guess he was that excited to get back to work. Which
right.
Whatever.
Yeah. I love the line from Deb where she says, "You could shit in the grass and Dad would call it fertilizer."
Yep, that was good.
That was good. And then, we get the Spanish guitar melodies. We talked a lot about songs and themes of the series. There's just a couple great Spanish guitar scores that play throughout the series.
They use a lot of Daniel Licht's original score combined with Pat Irwin's new score, and I'm loving it. Like, they use almost none of Daniel Licht's original score in New Blood, which I think kind of makes more sense because it was a little bit darker of a show, and it was like 10 years later, and just thematically it was just
very
a lot different. But now that we're back in Miami, they're being pretty liberal with the amount of original score they're using. But I also really appreciate Pat Irwin's contributions to it. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. I love when he gets back to the office and Tanya is watching the races, and she says,
"She's a gambling woman."
She says, "What's the number one rule?" And Michael C. Hall says, "Don't get caught." And then Masuka says, "No talking during the races."
Yeah,
that was
really
just
good.
A great
I love this little bit, but my favorite, I laughed so hard when after they move away from that scene for a second and they come back. I forgot what happens in that moment.
He
when they
fingerprints the guy that ran over that dog.
When he comes back from the fingerprinting, you can see Tanya sitting at the desk, and like her face, you can just tell she's sad. Like she's just like, and you can just be like, she fucking lost this.
She lost.
She
the
lost
race.
a lot of money.
Yeah.
And like just the way, like, oh my god, it was so funny. And a lot of this is probably just me being really nostalgic because I'm a huge Buffy fan, and like I always loved her facial acting. And I was just like, oh my god, I laughed out loud so hard when you just see her face, and I was like, she's about to cry. She lost. But not only did she lose, her horse broke its leg. And they're gonna have to put it down.
Right.
Damn.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where I literally, like, these notes that you see here I wrote like as I was watching the episode, and my notes go, oh my god, Tanya talks about the sedated horse, and he says, why do they do that? And she says, so he doesn't kick the vet in the head. And boom, I literally,
ding, ding, ding.
I paused the episode and I wrote this down, and I was like, this has got to be it. Let's go. And then my next note is, LOL. She says, probably a torphine. It's more powerful than morphine to the nth degree. I learned that from a jockey I used to ride before Neil made an honest woman out of me.
That was so good. That was a
great line. Yeah. And then I wrote, oh my god, is he going to go get the M99? And then, of course, he goes to the horse stables or whatever. He opens the door. He says, want to stretch your legs, buddy? And it was just such a like smooth Dexter thing.
Yep.
I was like,
classic
oh, man.
Dexter.
Yeah, I'm like, that's
I also
classic.
really like, so there's a little bit of damage control happening here because one of the biggest controversies with New Blood was how they said he used ketamine instead of M99.
Yes, I wanted to talk about this.
And I think it was one thing I think was really smart about the scene is not only did they come up with a cool way of introducing him getting M99 for the first time, but he did it in the same way that he got the ketamine in New Blood. He literally went to a vet and stole it from a vet. But in this case, they were using M99 because they need stronger stuff to use on bigger animals like horses.
Right.
In New Blood, he goes to a vet and he ends up stealing ketamine because they sell it to people in town for goats and things like that.
Right.
And I mean that doesn't like obviously quell the outrage about, because they tried to. Some people seem to think that the New Blood implied that he always used ketamine when he didn't use M99.
Well, it did. In the police records, it came up as ketamine, and people were livid over it.
People were livid over it. I think this is another one of those situations where, again, if they had just done another 2 or 3 episodes in that season, they could have like taken their time with this reveal and kind of explained it. But like, and I don't want to like. I feel like I'm dipping my toes into dangerous territory here. People are gonna freak out, but like, I've always taken it more as like, ketamine and M99 have a lot in common. In fact, on a tox report, it might be one of those things where it's like, we found traces of something. We can't really tell what it is. It could be ketamine.
Probably
it
ketamine.
Could be M99. There also could have been times where maybe he couldn't. When in Miami, he used ketamine because he didn't have access to M99 for a time. Right. Whatever it may be. I don't know.
Yeah, totally.
And all the bodies that they were testing, like from season 2, where they were taking bodies out of the ocean, had been at the bottom of the ocean for fuck ton of time. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. I could be talking out of my ass here, but like, I feel like it would be probably pretty easy to maybe mistake ketamine for M99 in very trace amounts after a body has been under the ocean for sure. God only knows how long.
And to be clear, I did not care about the ketamine because I'm one of those people where I'm like, I know what you mean. Like, I know, like, I'm like, it doesn't need to be like, okay. I think
they have an opportunity in Resurrection to maybe
explain it or something.
Explain it a little bit better, or maybe come up with a thing that would satiate people. I don't know if they're going to bother. I don't know if they
or like maybe Dexter like wakes up out of his thing and they're like asking him questions. He's like, no, it's M99, like, or just like a quick little whatever. I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me that much.
The dots that Angela was connecting in New Blood had more to do with what she knew about. What she knew about Kurt Caldwell, what she knew about Matt Caldwell, the whole thing about when Batista told her about Harrison, and she was already starting to be suspicious. Yeah. And then she was seeing the track marks on the necks, and she was like, well, the Bay Harbor Butcher was injecting needles into these people's necks.
Yeah.
It seems like this guy was injected with a needle. Like, it's almost like they didn't even need to mention the actual drug that was being used, and they just shot themselves in the foot by actually doing that.
Yeah, definitely.
But that is, I just like that in this episode, they kind of show his origin of using M99 for the first time, and he goes about getting it in the exact same way he gets it in New Blood.
Yeah, right.
It's almost like, so in New Blood, like 30 years later, it's like he needs to get drugs, and he's like, I remember the first time I got M99, I'm gonna go to a vet and get ketamine.
Exactly. Yep.
I thought that was a cool touch.
Yeah, that was a fantastic touch. And I love, he goes in, he gets it. He even gets the little, the chart that shows you like how many.
That was a good touch.
That was a good touch. And he goes back into the horse stall. I love this moment where the horse is coming up to him, and Michael C. Hall's monologue is, I asked myself, how do you calm a beast? Harry had been trying with me for years. And a callback to the brownie scene. Dexter pushes the hair behind the horse's ear.
He did what his mom did for him when he was younger.
Yeah.
To calm him.
Exactly.
Kind of nice.
And the horse like calms down. I'm like, oh, that's so great. And then Michael C. Hall says, sometimes we're not as scary as we look. And I'm just like, oh, and then like the heartwarming score plays, and I'm just like, oh, it's so good. It's so good.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Nice touch.
Yeah.
This was an episode that did a really good job with Michael C. Hall's voiceover. Like a lot of great.
There was
they've used it pretty good throughout, but like this episode in particular, I think they used it really well.
Yeah, for sure. And then Deb visits the grave, and everybody else misses, the time.
Everybody goes to the grave in this episode.
Yeah. Yep.
And they all have different
sentiments
and memories and monologues that go along with it, which I thought was really cool. Instead of all going together, they go separately. So they're all kind of like, Doris is like serving as like, I don't know, their confessional almost to a degree.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it showed each character as a unique person, because I heard somebody else say that Original Sin is much more of an ensemble show rather than focusing on Dexter. And I think these moments really kind of gave everybody their own like character moments. Like with Deb, she was like, I feel like you were the only person that like listened to me, and I really wish I had somebody to listen to me and someone to talk to. And then she looks back,
help me get my shit together.
Yeah, and she kind of looks back at the boyfriend that's waiting in the car, and she's like, I'll keep you updated on this guy. And that was also really interesting, because he shows up and picks her up, and then he brings her lilies, I saw somebody say. And I don't know if there's any significance with lilies. I know various flowers have kind of, had certain significance throughout the show. And I don't remember if lilies were ever something specific.
I don't think so. The only flower that comes to mind for me is the blood orchid in season 7, because Hannah gives him a blood orchid.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, but like it does. I mean, you bring up Gio again, the boyfriend, and I constantly on the verge of like I don't know what to think, because on one hand, I think he seems like a really nice guy.
I know,
but at the same time, I have to keep reminding myself that he's like probably in his 20s, and he is very openly pursuing a high school senior.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
Or maybe even junior.
She might be a junior, honestly.
You know what I mean? She's 17. She's not legal.
Right. Right.
And that was the first thing where I was like, when he maybe doesn't realize she's not of legal age when he first meets her, and then he finds out. And
he definitely does later.
He realizes, and then he's just like, fuck it, and like. That is like a red flag. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure. Yeah.
That's maybe a little bit of a red flag. It's everything else about him. I'm like, seems like a nice guy. Except that's a little weird.
Right. Yeah.
And we've mentioned this before. I think they keep alluding to his like rich father or something. And I was like, something's up. Something is up with this guy.
He even does something, and this may be nothing. This may be me just like thinking way too much about it, but they've made so much they focus so much on the pushing the hair behind the ear,
Yeah,
and in the last scene with Deb and Geo, she's like, "Hey, I think I want to slow down," and he's like, "That's okay." He's like, "We don't have to do anything," and then
and then he does it.
he pushes her hair behind her ear, and she's like starts making out with him again,
Hmm.
and I'm like,
I didn't notice that.
I wonder if he knows something. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if he is
I don't know.
aware.
I don't know. I think they either introduce this character for a very specific reason, or they introduce this character to just an agent of chaos to send
Right.
us into more confusion. Because this is another one of those characters. Like, this could very well end up being the kidnapper dude, or he could be the guy who's murdering drug dealers or drug users or whatever. Like, he could be a
Right.
bad guy. He could be. There was an interview this past week that John posted on Dexter Daily, and it was with Clyde Phillips, and he was talking about the show and kind of what to expect towards the second half of the season or whatever. And he alluded to a surprise villain, or like he's like,
Oh.
we have a big bad. We're building to a big bad, right?
Okay.
And I think people are going to be very surprised by it or whatever. I was like, he could be talking about the Brian thing, and people are just more like savvy than he's giving them credit for. Or he
Yeah.
could be alluding to any of these other characters on the show that are new that we're suspicious of. Captain
Mm.
Spencer, Geo,
Yeah.
to some extent, Tanya. You know what I mean? Like, it's like
Right.
they've done a really good job of kind of like making me go, I don't know what to fucking think. And that's what makes it a fun watch, because we know so much
Yes.
about Dexter's past already, but I'm I'm really enjoying the show because it's recontextualizing a lot of stuff. It's fleshing out characters in some really interesting ways, which is what any prequel should try to do.
Yeah.
And so far, I think it is justified its existence easily.
Yeah.
Um,
For
so
sure.
I'm really excited. I mean, like, my favorite seasons are usually the ones where like they're keeping you guessing, like,
Yeah.
who's the bad guy, what's going on. Like, New Blood, I thought was great when I didn't know and I still think New Blood is great, but like,
Hmm.
I wish they had kind of held the Kurt Caldwell revelation back a little bit longer. Like, I wish I was guessing about that until like
Sure.
much later in the season. But I think it's like episode 3 or 4 where they kind of like finally like, oh yeah, it's Kurt Caldwell, and I was like,
Right. Oh.
I could have been
Okay.
guessing. You could have kept me guessing for a while.
Right. Yep.
But it is
Yep.
what it is.
Yep. We after this we do get Dexter finds out that Levi Reed escaped. We get the whole court scene. We
I
didn't really
knew
talk
that
about that
fucking
much, but
alibi thing was gonna come back to bite him in the ass.
really,
Uh,
I thought it was like a throwaway thing.
I'm starting to treat it
And
very
then
much like, I don't think there's many throwaway scenes in this. That's one thing with Clyde
right,
Phillips. I think if you look at the difference between the Clyde Phillips era of Dexter, between seasons 1 through 4 and New Blood and now this, versus all the other seasons, I think there's very little fat to be trimmed in turn. Like, most scenes serve a purpose of some sort. I don't
right,
think there's a lot of moments I think there's not a lot of moments where you should just take them at face value. Like, they're always there for a reason.
right.
Um, I mean, I'm not saying he's completely
Sure.
uh, perfect at this kind of thing, but like, I think most of these things, these little one-off scenes, are there for, like, the arm that floated to the top of the water when you dumped Tony's body at the end of episode 3.
Yeah.
I think that's going to come back. I think that's going to be a thing, and it very well could have been just like a a dark, like, oh yes, alligators, floating body parts, yeah, darkness. But I think that's going to come back. I think that
I do
they're going
too.
to find that arm or something, and like, I think everything serves a purpose. Don't write anything off, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. I'm realizing that now. I think that I think you're right with that. A lot of this, like everything with the earrings and everything, they made such a big point of those to like, he didn't just get rid of the earrings. Like, they're still there in the pond. That pond is going to get investigated at some point, I would imagine, and they're going to
Yeah,
find these pieces of jewelry. So,
it's possible.
um, but we get a flashback to Harry finding out that Doris is pregnant after
Right
he's
after
had.
sleeping with Laura again.
Yeah, that was such a brutal scene because he's like,
Ooh.
"No, I gotta leave," and that felt very. I don't know, that scene, that flashback felt a little weird, where he's like, no, he's like, I need to leave. I need to go. He like opens the door like an inch, and then he's like, fuck it, and just turns around and starts making out with Laura. I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that scene. but it's interesting. He like
I think they could have made him at least like leave the room, like walk out completely, and then have him like barge
and then
back
be
in
like,
a second
fuck.
second later, be like, all right, fuck it.
Yeah,
I know what they were going
exactly.
for, but his hesitation didn't seem quite as long as it should have been. But
Yeah, it didn't quite seem it didn't seem quite genuine, I guess.
yeah, but
Um,
I'm still loving Laura. I think she's such a
oh,
great.
she's so good. She's
I'm
such a
actually
good
really dreading.
actress.
I'm actually really dreading the shipping container scene now
Do you
because I
think
like
that
her so
happens
much.
this season?
Oh, I'm almost positive. I
Yeah,
I think this season is building to the shipping container.
yeah.
Um,
It's
yeah,
got to, right?
I'm dreading it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But yeah, we get a flashback to Doris telling him that she's pregnant with Deb,
Deb.
and that was a good scene. Um, when does Doris die? Because it's only been a year in the main timeline, right? Like in
Yeah,
the
so she would have died when he was 19.
right. Okay, okay. Does she know about his infidelities?
I don't know. I think we're gonna find out probably.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I think she dies of cancer though. So part of me was like, does she die? Is there like, do we not know how she died? Are we gonna find out some revelation about why she died or whatever? But I was like, I think she just died of cancer. But I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised at all if we're gonna find out that she was very aware of his
Yeah.
infidelities.
Right. Right.
I think this is
Because
all just
so
like a perfect storm of shit that's gonna lead to him wanting to commit suicide because of all
yeah.
the guilt and
Because so
shit
far
like that.
they haven't really developed Doris as a character. Like we've seen her a
Right.
couple times, but I kind of wish they would. I mean, they only have so much time in every episode, but
Yeah.
I wish we would get a little bit more with her.
Yep. I agree.
Um, Aaron Spencer shows up at the bar and talks to Harry, and he essentially saves his job. Harry goes to like give him the badge, and he like takes it for a second, and he hands it back, and he's like, I convinced the mayor to keep you, but you're gonna be on the shit list until everything blows over."
Yeah.
Um, I thought that was a good
It was
scene.
a fun scene. It kind of also made me like Aaron Spencer a little bit more than I had previously. He's going to
Yeah,
bat for Harry, which I think is good. But I'm
yeah,
also
same.
suspicious of that man.
Yep,
I think he's probably just I think he's probably wound a little too tight, and
yep. I,
I think it's going to be bad.
I think so. Yeah, I would agree. So then my very next note after the Aaron Spencer thing is wait,
Wait, what the
in all
fuck?
caps, what the fuck? And so
Oh, yep.
this is when Harry is like driving up on Levi Reed, and we see Dexter in his room or whatever, and he's preparing the M99.
And the kill
And
room. Although you can't tell
yeah,
where he's preparing
yeah,
it.
you
It's like,
can't
oh,
really tell what it is yet. And I was like, so I thought what was going to happen was that Harry was kind of like waddling up to Levi with his gun, and he's like about to shoot him, and then he would see Dexter come out of the bushes and
yep.
trank Levi
That's what I
and
thought
like pull him
too.
off. I thought that's what was happening for a second, and I was like, is this the moment where we see Harry kill, or we see Harry sees Dexter kill Levi, and that's
Mhm.
kind of what spirals him into this whole thing. But no, actually,
He uses the M99 for the very first time on his own father.
yep.
Such a
And
cool I like to think that I'm like I feel like it's one of those things. This is one of those shows I love so much that I feel like I've seen everything,
mhm,
and then and then every once in a while they just surprise and they just hit me with something, and I'm like, oh shit, I had no that did not see that coming at all.
right,
So seeing him take out, and he's like, whoops, and I was like, oh, that's good, that is
yep,
good. And then of course Harry wakes up on a kill table, full
yeah,
blown kill table, strapped down with the plastic wrap, stripped of all of his clothes.
yep,
Dexter's in his full like kill apron,
yep.
and then
Apron and face mask and
you realize they're in their fucking living, they're in their kitchen, like in like
yep,
their kitchen.
yep.
Oh my god,
That
oh,
was it was
oh
so
so
good.
good.
I literally I've watched this scene in particular probably 4 or 5 times.
It's excellent.
Um,
It's one of the best scenes of the show so far, hands down.
it was amazing because even when they're at Levi Reed's house and Dexter hits Harry with the M99. Just the mannerisms. There's so many like little micro movements where I'm like, that's Michael C. Hall. Like that
This
is so.
episode, I saw it so much
Oh my god.
between this scene, the getting the scene at the horse track with the M99, and him standing at the grave. I saw Michael C. Hall in
all over it.
Patrick Gibson embodied Michael C. Hall embodying. I don't know which way that goes. Patrick Gibson embodying Michael C. Hall.
Yeah,
I saw Michael C. Hall in him better than he's ever done. So I think he's finally kind of like
figured it out.
He's figured it out. He's found his rhythm. He's been good up until this point, but I think he finally like really
nails it.
This time, especially in the kill room, man. Oh man, it was so good.
Just the way he like creeps around the table, just all of the little mannerisms. It's so good.
It's like, what were you thinking?
Oh god. Yeah, that was fantastic. That was the moment where he like tapped on the forehead. I was like, wait, and I like rewound it like 10 seconds. Yeah. I'm like, that was so good. And
how he's so casually, he's like, where are my clothes? And he's like, I told you the plastic
sticks better to bare skin.
And he just says it so like, yeah, stripped you down.
Yep.
And it's so cool because like I feel like in this moment, Harry thinks maybe he pushed Dexter too far and Dexter's killing him.
Like, yes, that was the thing I wanted to mention, is that this is so scary for Harry because he's like, this is it. He's like, he is killing me. I'm strapped to his table. I cannot get up. Patrick even says, or Dexter even says, he's like, try to get up. I bet you can't. And Harry's like struggling against it. And it was just like, there was so many things. I wrote down here, recapping the night's events to his victim. He's like, I saw you at the bar. And he's like, I followed you. You had this look on your face. I was like, where could he possibly be going? And you showed up to Levi Reed's house. What were you thinking? And like, the whole monologue is so good. Yeah. And just like the lean over the table with like his little head tilt, and he shows Harry the note. She's like, she won't be home at all tonight. Like,
he says Deb will be home any minute, and he goes, no, she won't actually. I guess she didn't read her note, and he like holds the note that she wrote up to him. So good.
I'm like, it's so like Dexter, because in a normal kill, that would be the moment where he like, it's almost like him holding a picture up or like holding up some sort of like evidence, and I'm like, and so he recaps.
And also the way he cuts when he finally does let him off the table, the way he cuts the plastic wrap is like. You've seen him do that the very few times he's actually let somebody off of his table. Yeah. In the original series, it's the exact same way that he did it there.
Yep. Oh my god, it's so good. I just watched the one the other day with he's got the blind guy strapped to his table. He doesn't want to kill him.
Episode 1, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he cuts him up, cuts the plastic up that
when
way.
When he realizes he can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this was and the way that this was like classic Dexter writing, like the subversion of expectation, the doing something that's in face value just like really fucked up, but like to like get a point across. Like his whole thing was just his way of saying, "Look, I'm in control now. I've figured out." And the thing where he's like that could have killed me with the M99. He was like,
nope, I
used the chart with your weight, and I even made sure it didn't have any bad interactions with your heart medication. It's like that's attention to detail kind of stuff I love.
Right. Yeah, it totally is.
The fact that this was just like his perfectly acceptable means of proving to his father that he can do this. Like, I'm ready. Because like at one point early in the episode, Harry says, "You're not ready. We're going back to basics." And it even reminded me, because we haven't seen a lot of it, actually any of it at all until this point in this series. But like in the original show, they show like training flashbacks where like Dexter would like surprise attack Harry in the middle of the night in the kitchen and like try and take him by surprise and stuff. And it was like they would get really intense with their training stuff to get him ready for this. And you hadn't really seen any of that. And this is like goes even further than that. It's like, no, I fucking stalked you like a victim, drugged you like a victim, put you on a table like a victim, and for a second you thought I was going to actually kill you, and like,
right.
But at the end, the reaction to this is Harry gets off the table and he's like, smelling salts.
Yeah.
You should use smelling salts to make them wake up faster so you don't have to wait around for a bunch of time for them to wake up.
This was the moment, dude. I love this because Dexter says, you can't stop this anymore. And it's when he's like holding the knife and like looking at it. And it's like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit.
Will he or won't he? Yeah.
Yeah. And then he like obviously cuts the plastic. But then there's a line that I loved where, you know, he's saying, he's like, you know, Doris wanted to see the best in me, but you never tried to change me. And then he says, Dad, you shouldn't have been the one to go after Levi Reed tonight. That's what you made me for.
Yeah.
Like, Harry has been, like, engineering him to be this perfect killer, which I guess he has, but it's just a crazy way to look at it. That's what you made me for.
It's also, like, hyper manipulative from Dexter's point of view.
To get it. Sure.
Like, and I love my favorite line, because Harry finally looks at him and he says, take him out. Right? Yeah. And then Michael C. Hall's monologue says, I've been talking to my dad for 5 minutes and I've only heard 3 words.
Right.
Take him out. And I was like, this manipulative prick, but he got what he wanted, and I love it. The dynamic was beautiful. The dynamic of this whole scene was incredible. It's got me so excited to see where this is going, because it's this is enriching the Dexter like storyline.
100-fold.
So well.
And especially because we realize, I mean, I guess, like, Harry's technically given him his blessing before, but this seems like it's the first kill order. Like, the first...
and I think that's going to happen again. I think before the end of the season, he's gonna start, like, using Dexter as, like, his personal hitman.
Yes, I think he is.
I think it's going to get so much worse than we ever really imagined before. And it's really going to make him his eventual suicide make more sense.
Yes,
because he's gone off. He's going off the deep end.
Yeah, he is for sure. Yeah. What a great little piece of Dexter lore that just like fits perfectly within the rest of the season. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't fuck up anything. It makes things better. Yeah. I'm like, this is what I wanted from this show. I wanted enrichment to the already amazing story, and this is exactly what I was hoping for. It's better than I was hoping for.
I think their writing team is on point this season. I want to give credit where credit is due. I think Clyde Phillips and Scott Reynolds in particular, who have been with the show since literal day one. Yeah. They understand it. And I don't know. This could have been a disaster, but I think the people who are...
I'm so glad it's not.
The people at the top who make the decisions about who gets to like make Dexter at the end of the day, you know what I mean? Like, they realize that that's the team. Like that's... And the people that they've gone out and put together for like writing and directing, it's like, I think it's just it's become kind of like a well-oiled machine at this point, which can sound bad, but I think I mean that as a compliment. I think they know what they're doing, and they've got a good feel for it, and that's all I could have hoped for with this. So yeah,
for sure. Harry says clean this up, and then we see Dexter kind of putting the house back in order.
Yeah.
And the theme that you and I were talking about earlier, it's called I believe the earliest version of it is called Astor's Birthday Party. Yeah. And it's the dun dun da da dun 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 da da da, and that like plays while he's putting. I'm like, let's go! I love that.
It's such a great track, and I think we talked about this before the recording.
Yeah.
But you had said something along the lines of, because you were trying to figure out where else they used it in the original show, and I was trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But you said something along the lines of it's this track that just makes you feel like everything's going to be okay. And I was like, these devious bastards, did they use that in the finale of season 4 right before we find out Rita was murdered? Yeah. And I go back and I pull it up. Sure fucking enough. He's walking. It's when he's killed Trinity. He's walking through the house. He's all proud of himself. And they're playing Aster's birthday party song.
Yeah.
And then you find it, and then you hear the cell phone ring, and then everything goes downhill from there.
Yeah.
But I was like that song it works in so many ways.
It works so well. I love it. It's by far my favorite track out of all of them throughout Dexter.
It's a good one.
So at some point, I forget where this fits in here, but at some point we saw Harry going to Doris's grave, and that's when he has the flashback to he's looking at the grave, and he doesn't say anything. He just has a flashback. Oh, it's just a flashback. Okay.
To when she was found out Doris was pregnant.
Yeah.
And then of course then Dexter finally goes at the very end.
Dexter goes and he says, "I miss someone looking at me and seeing a chance of goodness, even if it wasn't there. But maybe I could still do good. I hope that's all right, and I hope that it's enough to make you proud, because now there's no going back." It's like, oh, what a great wrap up to the episode.
Yep, that's good.
Oh my God, I just love. There's so many things in there where he's like, I miss someone seeing the good in me, even if there wasn't any good to be had. And, you and I talked about Deb earlier, how now she is that for him.
And he's not realized it yet.
He's not realized it yet. But he definitely does in the main series, because I think this comes up multiple times where he's like, Deb sees the good in me, even if there's not any there.
I think in the very first episode, he says something along those lines.
Yeah. I think so too. And then also the recognition that even though he's not under any of illusions that he's this warrior for justice, he's this vigilante person, he knows that he's kind of fucked up, but at the very least he says, but maybe I could still do good.
There's a difference between being good and doing good, so
yeah, there's a difference between the two things, and it sounds like he acknowledges that. And then I love this sentiment where he did care about what Doris thought, because for all intents and purposes, she was kind of his mom.
Yeah.
And he's like, I hope that's okay with you. I hope that, even though you wouldn't agree with what I'm doing now, I hope that the good that I do would somehow make you proud. It was just a great monologue altogether. And then the final, because there's no going back. Yeah. And obviously we know in the main show, there's never a point where he's not killing, besides, I guess, a little bit of season 2 where he has he's kind of shy about it a little bit.
After he kills his brother, he has trouble doing the deed again.
Right.
For a while.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the 10-year period where he's abstaining from killing between season 8 and New Blood.
Right.
Which is used to great effect as well. Yeah. So.
But it's kind of this great send-off for the episode, because it's from this point on, we are in full Dexter mode. We are in full, him hunting people and killing them all the time is in full effect now.
Yeah.
It was just a great way to
in a lot of ways it feels like we're setting the stage for the second half of the season, and it's the gloves are off, time, let's go.
Yep. We're
so
back
excited.
To Dexter as we know him. He's still going to be a young Dexter, probably going to be making mistakes or whatever, but he's essentially Dexter as we know him now.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. I think that's what this episode did really well, is it bridged that gap really, really well, I think.
Very, very true. Very excited. Cannot wait. I see your note here real quick, and I just want to correct. I think I may have given you this impression, and I think it was a mistake that I made.
Okay.
Because there is going to be a break in between episodes.
Yeah.
It was going to be a week where they don't have an episode. It's actually not next week. It's the week after.
Thank God. Okay.
So there will be an episode on January 10th. There will not be an episode on the 17th, I think is the date.
Okay, cool.
It's been very unclear for a while as to which one they're skipping.
Okay. Okay. I'm glad you cleared that up, because I did see something on on Twitter where you had mentioned like, I can't believe there's no episode next week.
I thought it was next week, and John corrected me. He's like, it's actually the week after that. And then I did some research.
That's interesting
IMDb
because
is still listing it as next week, but
okay.
John knows what's up.
Yeah, for sure.
I think at this point, Showtime would have said something if there was going to be a 2-week break.
Yeah, that's fair. Although do you not kind of feel like this would have been a good episode to stop for 2 weeks on? Like, I feel like this is kind of the episode to do it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm also a little worried. I'm kind of like, what is the point of even taking the break unless you need additional time to like finish? They're still doing post-production on some of the later episodes, I'm sure. But I also think it coincides very closely with the beginning of filming for Resurrection, and I'm not sure if that's going to have. Yeah. I'm wondering if they're taking a break so that they can, for a week, they can focus on promoting Resurrection and like talking about reveals and casting and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised. Although I'm half expecting that to be this week. But if we don't hear about it this week, then next week might be a thing where they don't show a new episode. And instead, they're just like hitting us with all kinds of Resurrection stuff.
Yeah, we've got to be getting news soon, right? Like we've got to be.
Yeah,
like I don't know.
It's filming is supposed, and this has been somewhat corroborated. I think it's filming starts this week, though not necessarily on Monday. So whatever that means, it might be Friday. I don't know.
Sure.
Filming schedules are weird, but yeah, cameras are supposed to start rolling sometime this week.
I'm so excited.
I'm very excited because the floodgates will open, and we will start finally getting news about that and kind of seeing how that's coming together. So I'm very excited,
dude. Honestly, at this point, are you more excited for more Original Sin or Resurrection?
Right now,
because I'm kind of more excited for more Original Sin.
Original Sin is like actual Dexter that we can watch and enjoy and talk about right now. So I'm very excited for that. Resurrection, though, is one of those things where I have so many questions and so many possible concerns that I just need to know about it. So I'm probably desperate for more information.
Yeah,
more so than I am more Original Sin. Because I'm loving Original Sin. It's good.
Because I think, like, for me, I'm kind of like, Original Sin will probably always be good because it's the prequel. It's telling us how we got to Dexter, the main show. But Resurrection is like new uncharted territory, and so I'm kind of like, please don't fuck it up.
It is new uncharted territory, but the people who have been at the helm, who have made all of the seasons, for the most part, there's all the seasons that I love are back in charge here.
Yeah.
So they just, like I said, I've talked about them having just kind of like good instincts about it.
Yeah.
So and on top of that, even though Michael C. Hall is obviously doing this probably because they're paying him a lot of money to do it, he doesn't mail in performances.
Yeah. So
I think he'll do fantastic, and I have faith that anybody else who's coming back to be part of it is going to do a fantastic job.
Yeah.
So, I just want some answers. I just want to know more about it. And once I know more about it, then I can go right back to enjoying Original Sin.
Sure.
But think about it this way: it is January 4th right now. Technically speaking, if they're sticking to their timeline, what they've said already, which all indications seem to point to, we're going to be watching Dexter Resurrection in less than 6 months.
Oh my god.
Which is bananas.
Yeah.
Absolutely bananas.
Oh man.
But we'll see. This is the week. We'll find out something this week, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But for now, I'm going to keep enjoying Original Sin. I'm actually really hoping that we hear about a renewal soon, because I think this is good enough to get.
Oh yeah.
For at least 2 seasons, maybe even 3. I don't know. I don't want them to go overboard and be like, do another 8-season run, but like 2 or 3 seasons, maybe even 4, pushing it. I think this would be a great run for this.
How old is he in season 1?
In season 1, he probably would have been
like 28.
No, in season 1, because he's 20 in Original Sin. In season 1, he's probably like 36.
Really? Okay.
I mean, it's supposed
that's older
like,
than I thought.
because it takes place. It was filmed and released in 2006, and all indications seem to indicate that it takes place at the same time in which it was released.
Yeah,
and that puts it about 15, 16 years after Original Sin, where he's 20. So mid to late 30s, which puts him in his probably late 40s for New Blood and Resurrection.
Right. Wow.
Maybe even early 50s. I don't know. I mean,
yeah, I think it'd be closer.
How old is Michael C. Hall?
Yeah, because I think, I mean, you got to think if he's 35 or whatever in season 1, and then 8 years of that, and then plus a 10-year gap, he's got to be in his 50s.
Michael C. Hall. Let's see come on, IMDb. 1971 is when Michael C. Hall was born.
Jesus.
So how does that make him? 50? Yeah. So he's 53. 53.
Okay. So yeah. So late 40s, early 50s.
Yep.
Interesting.
But hey, there's been some old serial killers sorry, that sounded really bad. I didn't mean to call Michael C. Hall. I'm just saying being in your 50s does not necessarily preclude you from being a very physically capable serial killer.
Oh yeah. Yeah, especially nowadays. Like,
yeah, exactly.
50 is the new 40. Awesome. Well, any other final thoughts? I don't mean to keep you here too long, but do you have any final ponderings before we go?
No, I think we've covered it. I mean, next week is exciting. I'm
gonna have to watch that.
Go watch The Thing. Yeah. It's not super spoilery, but it does.
See, that's what I always worry about with those. See the scenes from next week. I'm like, are you gonna show like the entire fucking episode in a trailer?
All their promos are like not even 20 seconds long.
Okay.
They're it's just like next week on Original Sin, and it's just like hits you with like what they do. Kind of give away the thing about Spencer's son, but we've already talked about that.
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, they've been pretty good. Although I will say this, because John watched the episode today. He hadn't even seen it last night. And Showtime posted a clip from the episode, which is fine if you want to do that. But like they literally posted Harry's kill room scene on Instagram. And it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
So he didn't watch it, but he saw it. And he was like, well, that's a spoiler. And I was like, yeah, that was... The statute of limitations on that had not expired.
Right, yeah.
That was way too early to be spoiling that. But whatever. Yeah. Their actual like next week ons have been pretty brief. And
see, that's why I stay away from all sorts of marketing materials. Like they're putting out all these trailers for Severance season 2 starts in like a week.
Yeah, and that's crazy.
And I'm like, they've put out trailers. I'm like, I'm not watching anything. I'm gonna go in not knowing anything. I'm gonna rewatch season 1. Like,
I need to do that too.
Yeah, I was telling my buddy Chris, who's been he's the guy that got me into Dexter at like 19 years old, and he's a co-host on the podcast. He was telling me today, because I sent him a text last night as I was watching episode 5, and I'm like, dude, you need to start fucking watching Original Sin. And he's making his way through Dark Matter on Apple TV. He's like, I'm trying to get through Dark Matter. I'm like, I know, but you're missing like the best Dexter we've gotten in like years and years. Yeah. And he's like, okay, I'll watch it. He's like, we also have Severance coming up. And I'm like, I know. I'm like, how am I going to watch Original Sin and rewatch? Because I have to rewatch season 1 of Severance. Yeah. There's no way I'll be able to remember everything that happened in season 1, even with a recap. I'm like, I need to actually watch it. So this next week, I have to rewatch season 1 of Severance, and then Dexter's on Friday. I'm just like, oh my god.
2025 is going to be a good year. For this kind of stuff.
For video games and TV shows.
Video games, TV shows, movies. The Last of Us Season 2 obviously is coming. And Daredevil, the first new season of Daredevil on Disney Plus is coming, which I'm pretty excited for. I hope it's as good. I'm
going to wait for reviews on that one. I'm going to wait for reviews. I mean, I haven't been thrilled about Disney's MCU.
I mean, I think they were making a big mistake by trying to like basically reset the canon and everything, and they decided against it, and they basically reshot most of the show, and they're just treating it like season 4 of the Netflix show, which I think is before it didn't even have Karen and Foggy from the original series. The only returning character and actor was Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock.
Right.
That was the and then they shot like half of the show, and they started to realize that
this feels working.
It feels more like a courtroom procedural, and they're like, this is not like he didn't even put on the costume until like the 3rd or 4th episode or something. So they're like,
oh shit,
back to the drawing board. And then they ended up bringing back Foggy and Karen and John Berthnall as the Punisher. So like they're bringing back everybody from that original show, and they're just treating it like season 4. So like that's what I want. That's what I wanted from the beginning. I hope it's good. I mean, that doesn't mean it's going to be good, but I loved most of the first 3 seasons. So
yeah,
I'm super excited to see what they do with it here. I hope it's good. And
very cool.
There's a lot of stuff. Severance, like you said.
Yeah,
can't wait. Can't fucking wait.
Are you watching Silo?
I'm not, but it's on my list.
On Apple?
I've read the book. I want to watch because I love Rebecca Ferguson.
Yeah, the show, like I am known on the internet for being the guy that does not say this. Okay.
Oh, okay.
The show is significantly better than the book.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah,
that's good.
The show is amazing.
I still haven't started the second season of Rings of Power.
I don't want to touch that show with a 10-foot pole.
I like the first season, but I get it.
That show and Wheel of Time just shit all over those franchises.
I have no connection to Wheel of Time, but
yeah,
I do want to watch the second season. I have a lot of stuff on my list.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Well, we have a lot of great stuff to watch. I'm really excited for 2025. And I'm glad that you're enjoying stuff too. I love hearing about, what you're watching and stuff besides Dexter, because obviously we have Dexter in common, but it's just fun to hear about what else you're watching and stuff. So yeah, we will wrap it up there. Nick, thank you so much for hanging out and talking about 4 and 5. And
awesome. You're welcome.
I'm genuinely so glad that we're both enjoying the hell out of this show. It's been so much fun to talk about it.
It could have been a disaster, but it's not.
It could have been a disaster.
But thank God it's not.
All right, everyone. Well, we are going to be wrapping it up there. Be sure to check out the Dexter Daily and the 4-Player podcast using the links below in the description. Also, I'll have Nick's Twitter there as well. You'll also find links to our socials and our Patreon down there where you can reach out and chat with us or support us on Patreon and watch these episodes live as we record them. You can also comment down below to join in on the discussion. I personally read all of the comments and try to respond to all of them, so definitely, give us a comment down there and tell us what you're thinking of Original Sin. Are you liking it, or do you feel like it's not living up to your expectations? Let us know. I'd love to have a conversation about that. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, remember that a pizza is just a circle of triangles in a square box, and that is a thought worth pondering. Goodbye.
It absolutely is. Thank you. Thanks again. Bye, everybody.